Welcome to Mr. Nightbleed. Tonight, in 5 true scary stories from disturbing small towns, we're leaving the highways behind and stepping into the forgotten corners of America. Quiet places where the streets empty too fast after sunset and the locals lower their voices when certain names come up. These are towns that hold their secrets in the shadows, where old houses lean a little too far over the road and something unseen seems to listen from the tree line. Every account you're about to hear is real, told by the people who lived in these towns, survived their stories, and walked away knowing they'd never look at a dark street the same way again. My goal this month is to reach 4,000 subscribers. Almost 90% of viewers come in, listen, and disappear without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Step into the darkness with us. Subscribe now. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what hour of the night it is for you. And if there's a small town near you that feels unsettling in a way you can't explain, write its name below. When the world grows quiet and the streetlights flicker, some towns don't sleep the way they should. Kill the lights, silence the world, take a slow breath, and let us begin. My name's Aaron Whitfield. I'm from Maple Ridge, Ohio, and I work as a flooring installer. Right now, I am sitting in my car at the gate of the old Maple Ridge Cemetery, and my hands will not stop shaking. So if my voice sounds messed up when you hear this, that is why. I had cold eggs for breakfast that day, the powdered kind from the gas station in the next town over, and coffee that tasted like burnt plastic. I remember that for some reason, the taste, the way it sat in my stomach like a stone. I was wearing my navy work hoodie, the one with the white paint streak on the left sleeve that never came out, no matter how many times I washed it. I checked the time on my phone when I locked my old apartment up, 7:42 in the morning, because I had to meet the landlord at 8 sharp to get the keys to the new place. The new place. That is funny to say now. It is not new. Everybody in Maple Ridge knows that house. I knew it too. I just never thought I would live in it. It sits on Butler Road, right where the street curves past the cemetery. The one with the leaning headstones up on the little hill, and the fence that looks like one good gust of wind would knock it over. The house is right across from that fence, front windows staring at the graves like eyes that never close. People call it the place that never sells. It just sits there, always for rent, always cheap, bright red for rent sign fading, and then being replaced every couple of years. I never really wondered why. I just thought, small town, people move, people die. Places sit empty. When you are trying to get out of a bad breakup and your credit is not great, and you just want 4 walls that are yours, you do not ask a lot of questions. 2 bedrooms, cheap rent, close to work, that was all I cared about. I should have cared about more. I pulled up a few minutes before 8. The street was quiet, just the sound of one truck down by the main road and a dog barking somewhere behind the houses. The cemetery gate was open a crack, like it always is. Chains hanging loose, but still looped, like someone closed it halfway and gave up. The sky was flat gray, not storm gray, just that dull Ohio overcast that makes everything look tired. The landlord, Mr. Yates, was already there, standing on the porch with a manila folder in his hands. He is one of those guys you see at every council meeting. Always has an opinion about potholes and high school football. I had seen him around but never talked to him much. He waved at me when I got out of the car, but it was this stiff kind of wave, like his arm did not really want to move. I remember he did not step off the porch, not once. "Morning, Aaron," he said. "Place is all yours if you want it. Papers are inside." His voice sounded like he was trying to be cheerful, but it had this tired edge to it. I walked up the front steps, and the boards felt soft under my boots, like they were hollow. He unlocked the front door and pushed it open, but he did not cross the threshold. "Keys are on the counter," he said. "Utilities are already on. Just sign what is on the table and slide it back under my office door when you get a chance." You got any questions? You know where to find me." I laughed a little, trying to make it less awkward. "You not coming in?" I asked. "Want to walk me through it or something?" He looked past me, over my shoulder, toward the cemetery. His jaw worked for a second. "You can see it just fine," he said. "2 beds, 1 bath. Basement's locked. You don't need the basement. Furnace is good. Hot water's good. Roof doesn't leak as long as the rain's not coming straight sideways. Real simple." "Basement's locked?" I repeated. "Yeah," he said. "No storage down there. Old junk, not worth messing with. You got plenty of closet space upstairs." He held the folder out like a shield. "You taking it or not? $850 a month, no deposit. You said you needed something fast." That part hooked me. No deposit. Nobody offers that around here. I could feel my brain doing the math, adding up the little bit of savings I had left, the hours I was scraping at work, the way my ex had looked at me when she told me to get my stuff out by Friday. I nodded and took the folder. "Yeah," I said. "I'll take it." He pressed the keys into my hand, like he was trying to get rid of them as fast as possible. Little metal teeth biting into my palm. "All right then," he said. "You call if you need anything. If you have any, issues, just let me know in the daytime, okay?" "Daytime?" I said. It was a weird way to phrase it. "You mean during business hours?" "Yeah," he said, too quickly. "That, business hours." Then he did this thing that stuck with me. He patted my shoulder once, like how people do at funerals when they do not know what to say. And he walked down the steps and back to his car without looking up at the windows, without looking at the cemetery, without looking back at me. He just drove away. I stood in the doorway for a second, smelling that old house smell. Dust and something faintly sweet, like old air freshener and paint thinner. The living room was small but decent. Wood floors, a couch someone had left behind, tan and sagging. The kitchen was straight ahead, white cabinets with paint peeling at the corners, an old fridge that hummed louder than it should. To the left was a narrow hallway with 2 doors, bedrooms, and the bathroom at the end. It was fine. It was more than I thought I would get, honestly. I brought my first load of boxes in that morning, clothes and dishes, and the box of tools I always keep in my truck for work. As I was carrying them past the front window, I looked out and saw Mrs. Carter from down the street. The old lady who always walks her tiny dog in a pink sweater. She stopped dead when she saw me inside the window. I raised my hand to wave, because that is what you do here, you wave. But her face did something strange. Her mouth opened just a little, not like she was going to say hello, more like she forgot how to close it. She tugged the dog so hard it yelped, and she turned around and went the other way, shoulders hunched. At the time, I told myself she was just old. Or maybe she did not recognize me, but it felt off. That was the first tiny leak of wrongness. I unloaded all morning. Nobody else came by to say hi, no welcome pies, no curious neighbors, nothing. That is not normal for Maple Ridge, not when a new person moves into a house that has been empty for a while. People here know everything about everyone, and they like to show it. Around noon, I made a sandwich in my new kitchen, standing at the counter by the window that looked straight across at the cemetery hill. The headstones looked closer from inside the house, like the distance between the fence and my front yard had shrunk. There is this one big stone near the gate with an angel carved on top, wings chipped at the edges. It caught my eye the first time I drove past this place, like it was watching the road. I ate and watched the angel and tried to tell myself I was just tired. The first night was when I stopped thinking about normal stuff and started counting sounds. I did not have a bed frame yet, just a mattress on the floor of the front bedroom, the one that faces the cemetery. I thought it would bother me, the view, but honestly, I was more worried about the draft from the window. I fell asleep sometime after midnight with the TV on low, some old sitcom rerun, just noise to keep my thoughts from spinning. I woke up to footsteps. Not the house creaking or pipes knocking, not that kind of thing. Actual footsteps on the floorboards in the hallway. Slow, steady, heel, then toe. That soft thump and slight creak you know when you have lived in wood houses long enough. At first, I thought it was the TV, but when I opened my eyes, the screen was black. The power light was still on, but the picture was gone. I could hear the fridge humming down the hall, so I knew the power was not out. The footsteps kept going, back and forth, like someone walking from the front door to the end of the hallway and then turning around. I held my breath and waited to hear my own door open, but it never did. I stared at the crack under the bedroom door, waiting for a shadow to break the little line of light from the hallway. Nothing moved. That went on for maybe a minute, maybe 10, I do not know. Then it stopped. Just like that. Silence. No sitcom laugh track, no footsteps, just the fridge hum and my own breathing way too loud in my ears. I told myself it was the house settling. Everybody says that, right? Old house settling. I did not get up to check. I lay there until the gray light of morning started to seep around the edges of the curtains. And then I got up and told myself I had dreamed it. That is the thing, though. I did not dream the next part. The next part was solid. The next day at work, I was useless. I kept replaying that sound in my head while I kneeled on other people's floors, measuring, cutting, laying down planks. My boss, Mike, asked if I was sick. I told him I was just adjusting to the new place. He stopped for a second, like the words "new place" had stuck to him, and looked at me. "You move into town?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Butler Road, that white place across from the cemetery." His tape measure snapped back into its case a little too fast. "You took that place?" he said. "Yeah, why?" He scratched his cheek with his thumb, slow. "Nothing," he said. "Rent's cheap, I heard. Guess that is good." "You heard something?" I said. Because my landlord was acting weird too, and the lady with the dog looked at me like I kicked her car. He shook his head. "People talk," he said. "You know how it is. Old stories. That house has been through owners. Folks say it never sticks with anyone, that is all. If it was me, I would have found a place further from the graves, but it is your business. You sleep all right?" The question made my chest tighten. "Why?" I asked. "Just asking," he said, looking away. "You want to switch to earlier shifts? You tell me. Sometimes the nights over there can feel long." He said it like he knew something, but did not want to say it out loud. I wanted to push, but he walked to the other end of the room and started talking about cuts and angles like the conversation was over. That night, I left the TV on again, louder. I told myself if I heard anything, I would get up this time, that I would not be that guy lying frozen on a mattress. I double-checked the front door, made sure it was locked, checked the back door twice, turned every light off except the one in the hallway. Like that thin strip of light under my door might keep something on the right side. I fell asleep around 11, I think. When I woke up, the hallway light was off. That is what hit me first. Total dark, except for the faint glow of the TV. My bedroom door was still half open like I had left it, but the hall beyond was just a rectangle of black. And over the TV noise, I could hear that sound again. Footsteps. This time, they were not in the hallway. They were in my room. Very soft, very slow, like whoever it was did not want the boards to complain. I could feel the vibrations more than I heard them, through the thin mattress into my ribs. I did not move. I did not breathe. The air felt thick, like it was trying to push my lungs closed. There was this smell, too, under the old dust and paint. Something like damp cardboard and old film. I know that sounds strange, but that is what came to mind. The smell from the back of my grandma's closet, where she kept boxes of photos. Then, so close I thought it was right above my head, I heard breathing. Not heavy, not monster breathing, just slow, patient breaths, like someone standing over you while you sleep. I wanted to yell or jump up or swing or something, but it was like my muscles were not getting the message. My hand twitched, and that was enough. The breathing stopped. The footsteps started again, moving away this time, past the end of the mattress, across the room, then out into the hallway. I watched the doorway, waiting for some shape to block the TV glow. Nothing. I heard the floor creak out in the hall. Then it was quiet. I do not know how long I lay there after that. I must have drifted off from pure exhaustion, because the next thing I knew, my phone alarm was going off and the room was full of morning light. The hallway light was on again, even though I know it had been off. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the bulb flickered. Maybe I never turned it off. Maybe the switch was loose. You start stacking maybe like sandbags around you. You think if you pile up enough, the water will not come in. That evening after work, I decided to do what I should have done on the first day. Really look at the place. In the daytime, the house just looked tired, not scary. Old paint, old windows, that kind of thing. I went room to room with the toolbox, tightening loose screws, checking the door frames, tapping on the walls. In the hallway, between the bedrooms, there was this one spot on the wall where the paint bubbled, like there was moisture behind it. I pressed my fingers against it, and it felt soft. I figured it was a bad patch job, maybe wallpaper underneath. So I got a utility knife and made a small cut to see what was going on. A little rectangle of paint and plaster flaked away and fell to the floor. Behind it, instead of insulation or old paper, I saw brown cardboard. I widened the hole with the knife, and my fingers, careful, trying not to wreck the wall more than I had to. A smell came out, that same old photo smell from the night before, but stronger. There was a little hollow space between the studs, and inside, stacked tight, were Polaroid pictures. I am not kidding. Dozens of them, maybe more, jammed in there like someone had just shoved them in and closed the wall. My first stupid thought was that I had found some cool vintage thing, like maybe the previous owner was a photographer or something. I pulled a handful out and shook the dust off. The first one was of a bedroom. Not mine, but similar. Same kind of old wood floor, same style of baseboards. A person was lying on a mattress on the floor, on their side, facing away from the camera. You could not see their face, just the shape under the blanket. The flash had blown out part of the picture. That harsh white spot you get with Polaroids, taken in the dark. The second photo was another bedroom, different again, but with that same mattress on floor thing. Someone on it, again turned away, again in the middle of sleep. My scalp prickled. I went through the stack one by one, and my stomach got colder with each one. Different rooms, different furniture, some with posters on the walls, some with floral curtains, some with bare windows. But the angle was always the same. The point of view was always from just inside the doorway or from the corner of the room. And the subject was always the same kind of scene. Someone asleep, caught mid-breath, totally unaware. Some of them clutched the blanket like they had turned over a second before the picture was taken. Some had one leg hanging off the side. In one, a woman's hair was spread across the pillow, like she had just exhaled. There were no faces. Either the person was turned away, or the hair blocked it, or the blanket was up over their head. No cabinets, no shelves with family photos. Nothing that told me who they were. Just strangers sleeping. I counted 17 in my hand before I stopped and put them down on the floor because my fingers were starting to shake. That was not the worst part. The worst part was the backgrounds. In some of them, I could see that cheap tan couch, the same one in my living room. In others, I could see the same narrow hallway, the same bathroom door at the end. Different rugs, different lamps, but the bones of it were this house. My house. This place that never sells. Whoever took those pictures took them here, in these rooms, of people who had once lived in these same four walls, sleeping in the same spots I was sleeping now. And they took enough of them that they had to hide them in the wall. I do not know how long I sat there in the hallway with those photos spread out on the floorboards in front of me. Long enough for the light outside to dim a little, long enough for the fridge to kick on and off twice. My brain kept trying to file it under something reasonable. Maybe some weird art project, maybe some old tenant with issues. Maybe, I do not even know. You run out of normal explanations pretty quick. I started to wonder who else knew. If Yates knew. If the neighbors knew. If that is why Mrs. Carter turned around. I put the photos back into a neat stack. I meant to put them back in the wall for some reason, like that would undo finding them, but my hand would not do it. I could not bring myself to shove them back into that dark space, so I carried them to the kitchen and put them in the middle of the table, like evidence. Then I did something that I do not really want to admit, but I will, because this is the truth. I stayed. I did not pack my stuff and leave right then. I washed my hands, made some instant noodles, and watched TV at the table with that stack of pictures right there next to my bowl. I kept looking at them like they might rearrange themselves if I blinked too long. When you have nowhere else to go, your brain does strange gymnastics to make staying seem okay. It was not okay. That night, I could not bring myself to sleep in the bedroom facing the cemetery. I dragged my mattress into the smaller back room, the one that looks out over the patchy backyard and the alley. I told myself it was because the street light out front was too bright. But the truth is, I did not want my bed lined up with the window that looked directly at the angel stone in the graveyard. I closed the door all the way this time and shoved a chair under the knob, like that would do anything against someone who could walk through walls and take pictures of people in their sleep. I left the hallway light on. I almost slept with the main overhead light on too, but I could not stand the idea of waking up under that bright glare. I lay there for a long time, listening. Every creak made me tense. At some point, the fridge hummed, and I realized I could hear it faintly, even back here. For a while, nothing happened. No footsteps, no breathing, just the occasional car in the distance, and the rustle of leaves. I started to think maybe finding the photos had scared me more than I needed to be scared. That whatever had happened here was in the past. I actually started to drift off. Then I heard the camera. If you are old enough, you know the sound I mean. That little mechanical click and whine of a Polaroid ejecting. That soft whir as the picture slides out. It came from the hallway, clear as anything, like someone was standing just outside my door with one of those old instant cameras. My eyes snapped open. I stared at the crack under the door. The hallway light was still shining, but something moved in front of it, blocking part of the glow. A shadow, just a thin shift, like someone adjusting their weight. The camera sound came again, followed by a gentle rustle, like a photo being laid carefully down on wood. My throat locked. I wanted to yell, "Who is there?" but the words got stuck somewhere. Then, slow and careful, I heard footsteps move away from my door. Not toward the bedrooms, not toward the living room. They went toward the front of the house, toward the door that faces the cemetery. I waited. When I finally moved, my legs felt like rubber. I pulled the chair away with both hands, trying not to make noise. I opened the door a couple of inches and peered out. The hallway was empty. The light shone down on bare floorboards. Nothing was there, but right in the middle, between my door and the turn toward the living room, there was a single Polaroid lying face down. I thought about leaving it there. Something in me whispered that if I pretended not to see it, if I just stepped over it and walked away, maybe none of this would be real. But that did not hold up to the fact that my heart was trying to beat out of my chest. I stepped into the hall, one bare foot at a time, and knelt down. I could feel the cold of the wood through my skin. I picked up the picture. The back was still warm from developing. My fingers shook. I turned it over. It was me. It was my mattress in the back bedroom, the one I had just moved. I was on my side, facing the wall, blanket pulled up to my shoulders. The angle was from the doorway, just inside, like every other photo. You could see my work hoodie on the floor by the bed, the one with the white paint streak. My face was turned away, but it did not matter. I knew it was me. The picture was bright in the middle from the flash, washing out details, but the edges were clear enough to see the time on the digital clock on the floor. 11:47. That was less than an hour before I woke up. I do not remember hearing the shutter then. I do not remember anything. Something had been in that room with me, close enough to take that picture, and then walk out, calm as you please. Close enough to step over my clothes and stand right where I was standing now while I slept like a fool. I dropped the photo like it had burned me. It fluttered to the floor and landed face up, my sleeping self staring at the ceiling, unaware. I backed up until my shoulders hit the wall. "No," I said out loud. Just that one word, no. It did not change anything. The house felt full, like the air was thicker than it should be in an empty hallway. I could not hear breathing, but I could feel attention, if that makes sense. Like every corner of the place was turned toward me. I grabbed my hoodie from the bedroom floor, did not bother with the mattress or my clothes or anything else. I jammed my feet into my boots without tying them and went for the front door. The deadbolt stuck for a second, and that small delay sent a spike of panic through my chest, like the house was thinking about not letting me out. Then it turned. The door opened. Night air crashed into me, cool and damp and full of the smell of cut grass and something faint from the cemetery flowers. I stepped onto the porch and pulled the door closed behind me, key still in my hand. I could see the cemetery gate straight ahead, the cracked stone angel above the hill. For a second, I thought I saw someone standing up there near the angel, just a darker shape in the dark. But when I blinked, it was gone, or it had never been there. I did not stick around to figure out which. I walked down the steps, across the front yard, and stopped on the sidewalk. My car was to the left. The cemetery gate was to the right. I do not know why I turned right. It makes no sense, even to me. All I can tell you is it felt like going to the car would mean going home, and that house was not home. My feet carried me toward the gate instead. The chain on it rattled a little in the breeze, metal on metal, but the gate itself did not move. The angel stone looked down at me, that carved face smoothed by years of rain. For a second, I thought about going inside, walking up the path between the graves to the top of the hill and just sitting there until sunrise. Instead, I stopped at the fence, fingers resting on the cold iron. Behind me, I could feel the house like a weight between my shoulder blades. The front windows were dark, but you know that feeling when you can tell someone is staring at you, even if you cannot see them. That is what it felt like, except it was a building. I pulled my phone out and checked the time. 3:02 in the morning. That is when it clicked that I could not go back in there, not even to grab my wallet, not even to get my tools. I called Mike because I did not know who else to call. He answered on the third ring, voice thick with sleep. "You all right?" he asked. "No," I said. "I am at the cemetery. I am at that house. I cannot go back in there. I know that sounds crazy, but I cannot. Something is wrong in there." There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing. "You find the pictures?" he asked quietly. The question made my knees feel weak. "You knew?" I said. "You knew there were pictures?" "Not exactly," he said. "I heard about them. My cousin's friend rented that place for a few months back in the day. He said he heard things, saw things, said he found some photos in the attic, sleeping people. Same kind of thing, by the sound of it. He moved out. Place has been changing hands ever since. I did not want to spook you." "You did not want to spook me," I repeated. "Mike, somebody took a picture of me sleeping, tonight, like an hour ago. It is in the hallway right now. It is warm." Saying it out loud made it real in a way I was trying to avoid. My voice cracked on the last word. "You are outside?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. At the gate. "Stay there," he said. "Do not go back in. I will come get you. We will go to my place." "I am not stepping back on that porch," I said. "Good," he said. "You do not need to. Just stay by the road. Keep the house in sight, all right? Just in case." "In case of what?" I asked. But he had already said he was on his way, and my brain did not really want an answer. I hung up and leaned against the fence. The metal was cold enough to bite through the fabric of my hoodie. Across the street, the front windows of the house reflected the faint glow of the streetlight and the red taillights of the one car that went by. For a second, just a second, I had the stupid thought that maybe I should have grabbed the stack of photos from the kitchen table, like they were evidence that would prove I was not losing my mind. Then I remembered the way the wall had smelled when I opened it, the way the landlord would not cross the threshold, the way Mrs. Carter had turned around. I realized nobody in this town needed proof. They all already knew enough to stay away. When Mike pulled up, he did not park in front of the house. He stopped down the street a little and flashed his headlights twice. I walked to his truck, watching the house the whole time, like it might lunge at me if I turned my back. "You got everything?" he asked when I climbed in. I shook my head. "Just me," I said. "And this." I held up the Polaroid I had shoved into my hoodie pocket without realizing. The one of me sleeping. The edges were cooler now, fully developed. He did not take it. He just looked at it from a distance and then put the truck in gear. "We can get your stuff some other time," he said. "Daytime, with other people." I laughed once, sharp. "You think I'm going back in there?" He kept his eyes on the road. "You do not have to go in. I will talk to Yates. He can send some guys, move your box to storage or something." "He knew too," I said. "He knew, and he handed me the keys anyway." "He needs money," Mike said. "Town's dying. People do desperate things. I am not saying it is right. I am just saying it is how it is." We drove in silence for a while. When we passed the cemetery from the back road, I turned my head away so I would not have to see the angel stone watching the street. Mike let me crash on his couch that night. The next morning, we both went to work like nothing had happened. That is what you do. You do not call the police and say, "Hey, there is a house that takes pictures of you while you sleep." You do not go to the newspaper. You go lay flooring in someone else's quiet, normal living room, and you try not to think about the fact that someday they might move and leave behind nothing but indentation marks on the carpet. I did not go back to Butler Road. Not that day, not the next. I called Yates from the job site and told him I was out, that I was not paying a dime, that he could keep my stuff if he had to, but I was not sleeping another minute under that roof. There was a pause, and then he said, "All right," in this resigned way, like he had already had this conversation with other people before me. "Keys?" he added. I told him they were on the kitchen counter. He did not ask me why I left. I did not ask him who had lived there before or what had happened to them. I changed my route to work so I would not have to drive past the house. The one time I accidentally did. A few weeks later, the "for rent" sign was already back up in the yard. New paint, bright letters, same old windows staring at the cemetery. I do not walk past cemeteries anymore. If I am driving and I see headstones coming up, I turn the radio up or call someone just to hear another human voice. I will cross the street to avoid a churchyard. I have not been to a funeral since, and if someone mentions the word Polaroid, I feel my stomach twist. Sometimes at night, even at Mike's place or the little apartment I got after, I will be half asleep and I will hear that faint click and whir in my head, like the camera is still somewhere in the walls, still taking its quiet little trophies. I know that house is still there. I know the photos on the kitchen table probably ended up back in the wall, or in a box, or thrown away. Or maybe not. Maybe the house has them filed away somewhere I cannot see. Maybe the next person who moves in will find a bigger stack. Maybe my picture will be in it, tucked between the others. That is what keeps me up. Not the footsteps, not the breathing. The idea that somewhere inside those walls, there is a record of me, asleep and helpless, and something that does not show up in the frame, standing close enough to touch my shoulder. I am telling you this parked at the cemetery gate because this is the closest I will let myself get to that stretch of road again. I thought if I came here and said it all out loud once, maybe it would leave my head a little. It has not. The only thing it has done is make one thing clear. That house will not stay empty. It never does. So if you ever see a rental listing for a cheap little place across from a small town cemetery, wood floors, 2 bedrooms, no deposit, and the landlord seems a little too eager to hand you the keys from the porch, you listen to the part of you that feels the air go heavy. Do not tell yourself you are being silly. Do not stack up maybes. Walk away, find somewhere else. Because I swear to God, someone is still in there, waiting in the walls, and they have not finished their collection. My name's Caleb Morton. I'm from the west side of Briarfield, Missouri, out by the old cemetery road, and I work as a mechanic at the shop next to the grain silos, the one that always smells like rubber and cold coffee. And I swear to God, I have never been this tired in my life. Man, my hands are still shaking, and the steering wheel keeps creaking under my grip like it is going to crack. And I keep watching the gate in front of me, because if I look away for too long, I start hearing that music again, even though there is nothing on the road except the thin line of frost and those stupid plastic flowers rattling on the other side of the fence. And I know I am supposed to start at the cemetery part, because that is where I am right now, parked by the rusted chain link, 3 a.m. with the gas light on, and my phone at 12%. But that is not where it really started, not for me. It started last year with something so normal, I almost feel stupid saying it out loud. It started with pancakes and a dumb shirt, because I remember exactly what I ate and what I put on. The first night I went to see the midnight parade, the thing everyone in town pretends they never heard about. I had cold pancakes I reheated in the microwave around 6 p.m. after my shift. The syrup had that skin on top because it had been in the fridge too long, and I had this dark blue work shirt that still had a smear of oil on the front pocket from some old Chevy. I fixed that afternoon. I thought about changing it, but I did not because it was December. Nobody was going to look at me that close in the cold. And I remember checking my phone at 6:32, seeing the weather app saying it was going to drop below freezing by midnight, and I almost stayed home, almost just fell asleep in front of the television. But my buddy at the shop, Mark, had brought it up the day before while we were changing a set of tires. He said it real casual, like it was nothing. Said, "Hey, you ever hear about that midnight thing they do downtown in December, that parade?" And he said it in this half-joking way, and then shut up the second I asked what he meant. Like he had already said too much, and he would not look at me. Just kept the air hose hissing, like that sound would cover what he had let slip, so it kept bothering me. You know how something small just sits in your head and does not leave? So after work, I went home, ate those pancakes, put on that shirt, and I sat there scrolling my phone at the kitchen table, trying to find anything about a midnight parade in Briarfield. I searched the town name, the word parade, December events, holiday schedule, everything you can think of. I checked community pages, the local paper, even the old blog the library keeps that still posts about craft nights. Nothing. Not one mention, man. And that is not normal. Not around here. If someone sneezes on Main Street, there is a picture of it posted somewhere. But there was nothing about a parade at midnight. And that emptiness felt wrong in a way I could not explain. Like when you walk into a room and every picture frame has been taken down and you cannot say why it bothers you. It just does. So I texted Mark and I said, "Hey, you mentioned some midnight parade. You messing with me or what?" And he took way too long to answer. Then finally wrote back, "Forget it, man. Just a dumb story. Stay home that night." And that made it worse, because if it was dumb, he would have laughed. He would have sent some stupid meme, not told me to stay home. So by 10 that night, I was already restless. I got in my truck, the old white one with the dent in the tailgate, and I drove around town just to see if anything looked different. And that is when I noticed the flyers. Not a lot of them, just one or two taped up where people would not look too hard. One was half crooked in the window of the laundromat next to the graveyard road. Another one pinned to the community corkboard outside the diner. But they all looked the same. Plain white paper, black ink, no fancy design. Just words that said, Midnight Procession, December 12th, route from Chapel Street to Old Hill. And there were no sponsors, no organization names, no friendly logos from the bank or the car dealership. Just those words and a faded picture in the middle that I could not quite make out through the condensation on the glass. It looked like a row of people carrying something, but the faces were just gray smudges. And I remember thinking it was weird they called it a procession instead of a parade. But I told myself maybe it was a church thing, maybe some small group that did their own tradition. And I started to drive home. I really did. But as I passed the cemetery the first time that night, it hit me that Old Hill was what people used to call the rise behind the graveyard. Before they put in the new road, my grandfather used to talk about sledding down Old Hill when he was a kid. And the idea that whatever this was went past the cemetery made that crawling feeling under my skin. Get worse, the headstones were just gray teeth in the dark, and the plastic flowers on some of the graves turned in the wind like they were looking at the road. And I glanced at the dashboard, saw it was almost 11, and I told myself I would just drive to Chapel Street, just to see if anyone was there. I told myself I would stay in the truck with the doors locked. I was trying to be logical, so I parked near the end of Chapel Street where the old brick church sits, the one with the single bell tower that never rings anymore. And I saw the first people gathering, quiet, not excited like a normal parade crowd. No kids running around, nobody drinking hot chocolate or holding signs, just people standing near the curb, spaced out, not talking much. They were mostly older folks, the kind you only see at early morning grocery runs, the ones who still read actual newspapers, their hands tucked into coats that looked like they had been in the closet for years. And nobody had a camera out, which was strange to me, because these days, people point their phones at everything. So I stayed in the truck at first, engine running, watching, and for a long time, nothing happened. The streetlights hummed, the traffic from the highway faded, and the air got colder until my breath fogged the inside of the windshield. And I started thinking this was stupid, that maybe the flyer was old, maybe they had not done this thing in years, and I had just found an old piece of paper someone never took down. Then at exactly midnight, and I mean exactly, my phone ticked from 11:59 to 12, and while I was looking at the numbers, the bell in the tower rang one clear, heavy sound. Even though I have never heard it ring in my life, it shook the air, and the people on the sidewalk all turned their heads toward the far end of the street at the same time, like something had pulled a string through their necks, and I felt my stomach drop in this slow, heavy way. Man, because I realized none of them were talking. Not one cough, not one laugh, just the sound of shoes shifting on pavement. And then I heard the music. It was not loud. It did not come from any speaker I could see. It was thin and far away like the radio in another room. Some kind of marching tune, played on what sounded like an old recording. It had that warped wobble in it, like tape. And I knew, somewhere deep, that this was wrong. That it was too quiet for that many people on a street. But I did not move. I just cracked my window to hear better, and the cold hit my face like a slap. Carried that metallic smell you get near cut stone and damp dirt, probably from the cemetery down the road, and the music got closer without getting louder, if that makes sense. And the first figures turned onto Chapel Street from the intersection, marching in a straight line 2 by 2, and every hair on my arms stood up because they were all wearing masks. Not party masks, or those cheap Halloween things. These looked handmade, painted with care, full faces that covered everything from chin to forehead. Each one different. And I swear to you, dude, I swear, I started recognizing them. Not like I recognized the people underneath, but like I recognized the faces the masks were copying. I saw a man in a gray coat with a mask that looked like old Mr. Halper. The pharmacist who went missing when I was in middle school. The one who supposedly left a note about moving out west. I saw a woman with a floral scarf wearing a mask that looked like the lady who ran the thrift store and never opened again after some family emergency. There was a teenager in a hooded jacket wearing the exact face of a kid I used to see at the gas station late at night. The one they said ran away, and I know how it sounds. I know you are thinking I just imagined it, that I was forcing those faces onto them, but it was too exact, down to the little mole by the nose, the gap in the teeth carved into the paint, and nobody on the sidewalk reacted. They just watched with those dull eyes, arms at their sides, like this was the most normal thing in the world. And the marchers did not wave, did not smile. They just moved, perfectly in time with that thin music, their shoes tapping the pavement in a rhythm that made the skin between my shoulder blades feel too tight. And somewhere between the third and fourth row, I realized I had started filming. My hands had moved on their own. My phone pointed through the cracked window, the red recording circle glowing. And that made me feel a little safer because it meant I would have proof later. Proof that this was real and not just a tired brain. So I held the phone steady and followed the line of marchers with the lens as they went past my truck heading down Chapel toward the main road that leads to the cemetery. I counted rows without meaning to. 6, 7, 8. Each pair of masked faces staring straight ahead. And there was something else about them that bothered me, but I could not place it until the 9th row, when the taller figure in the pair turned his head a fraction as he passed under the streetlight, and I saw that there were no eye holes in the mask, just the painted eyes, dark and flat, no cutouts, no gaps for the person underneath to see through. So either they were marching blind, or there was nothing behind those faces that needed to see. And my chest got tight. I almost dropped the phone, and I told myself maybe the holes were just very small, hidden in the shadows, because that was easier than the other ideas. And I kept filming, angle following them as they moved farther down the street. And then, in the 11th row, I saw one that froze me worse than the cold ever could. It was a man in a brown work jacket, his mask shaped like a face I had only seen in a framed picture in our hallway growing up. My uncle, the one who died in a car wreck before I was born. I had seen that photo 1,000 times, the same slope of the nose, the same tired set of the mouth, the same crease in the forehead, and it looked like someone had taken that picture off the wall and stretched it over bone, painted it in dull colors, and put it on a stranger's head to march through town at midnight. And I realized the pattern: old disappearances, old deaths, the ones people stop talking about out loud, but never really forget, put on display on these silent bodies that moved with that unbroken rhythm. And then, just when I thought I could not take another second, something happened that pushed it from strange into wrong. In a way I still cannot sit with. The 12th row came into view, and one of the figures turned its head directly toward my truck. Not just a casual glance, but a slow, deliberate turn. And the mask it wore was not someone older, not a historical face. It was my coworker Mark, exactly. The way he looks now, not aged, not faded, just him. The crooked nose from when he broke it on a bike as a kid. The faint scar on his chin. The way one eyebrow sits higher than the other when he is confused. All of it carved and painted onto that smooth white base. And the body under it was about his height and build. And I could not breathe because I knew where Mark was supposed to be. At home in bed with his wife on the other side of town, nowhere near Chapel Street. And while I stared, that mask mouthed something through lips that did not quite move right. And I heard my name, clear in my head, like someone had whispered into my ear inside the truck. Not muffled through glass, not carried by wind, just Caleb in his exact voice. And my grip loosened and the phone dropped into my lap, recording at the ceiling. And when I scrambled to pick it back up, the 12th row was already farther down, moving toward the intersection. And I wanted to throw the truck into gear and get out of there. I really did. But something held me. Curiosity, or fear, or that frozen feeling you get when you see headlights coming straight at you. and I watched as the procession turned onto the main road, heading toward the cemetery hill, still with that thin music trailing behind them. And the people on the sidewalks followed at a distance once the last row passed, walking slow, not chatting, just trailing like shadows. And I sat there alone, engine idling, my breath fogging the glass again. And eventually I forced myself to drive home. I did not follow them to Old Hill. I was not that brave. Or maybe I was too smart. I do not know. I went home and locked every door twice and watched the recording on my phone over and over until the battery gave up. And here is the thing that will sound like a lie, but I need you to understand, it is not. The video is nothing. It is just the street, dim and empty. No marchers, no masks, no people, no sound except this faint little crackling noise and what might be a faraway faint tune if you strain your ears. But no voices, no footsteps. Just my own breathing and then the ceiling of my truck. When I dropped the phone, that is all. And I checked the timestamp. It was exactly midnight to 12:05. The right length, the right time. But the part that mattered was blank. And I thought maybe the low light ruined it. Maybe the camera glitched. So the next day at the shop, I tried to bring it up to Mark, asked if he had ever heard of a midnight procession, tried to make it sound like I had stumbled across some old town history. But he shut down hard, would not look at my screen, said he was too busy. And when I pushed, when I said I thought I had seen his face on someone last night, he finally snapped, not angry loud, but this tight, quiet way, and said he did not know what I was talking about, and that there was no parade in Briarfield at midnight, and that I needed sleep. And then he walked away and would not talk to me the rest of the day. And after that, things just got stranger. I drove past Chapel Street that afternoon. No flyers in the windows anymore. The one at the laundromat was gone, like it had never been taped there. And when I went to the diner, the corkboard was bare, except for some old babysitting ad with the phone number torn off. No white sheet about any procession. And I started doubting everything, started wondering if I had dreamed most of it. But the video was still on my phone, and the date and time were still there. So I told myself I would forget it, that it was just some weird sleep-deprived hallucination. Except December rolled around again, like it always does. And tonight, I woke up in that half-dark, where you do not know if it is morning or night. And my phone had one new notification, some town app I do not remember installing, just a little bell icon and a message that said, "Midnight Procession Route Update. Tap for details." And when I tapped it, the screen went black for a second, and then showed a simple white page. No header, no back button. Just text that said, "Route from Chapel Street to Old Hill. December 12th, same as before." And under that, there was a picture, clearer this time, of a row of masked people marching past the cemetery fence. And in the front row, there was a mask that looked like me. Not how I see myself in the mirror, but how I look. When I catch my reflection in the shop window after a long day, hair flattened by a cap, lines around the mouth I do not want to admit are there, a smudge of oil along the jaw from wiping sweat with the back of my hand, the exact shirt I was wearing in the bathroom mirror, maybe an hour earlier, this same blue one, and I dropped the phone in the sink. I almost cracked the screen, and when I picked it up, the notification was gone. The app icon was nowhere on the home screen. My battery had drained 5% in that one moment, like something had been sucking at it. And I knew, right then, that this was not just a one-time thing, that there was a pattern I had stepped into without meaning to. One that repeats every December. And that this time I was not just a witness, I was part of it, marked or listed, or whatever word you want to use. And that is why I am here, parked by the cemetery gate at 3 a.m, because when I tried to ignore it, when I tried to stay in bed and pretend that message never popped up, the power in my house flickered out just for a second, long enough for the heater to click off and the clock to reset. And when the lights came back, the radio in the kitchen was playing that same thin marching tune from nowhere, volume knob at 0. speakers hissing out this old warble like it was coming from behind the wall instead of inside it. And I grabbed my keys and left. Did not even put on a coat, just took the shirt I had on and the jacket from the hook by the door and walked out to the truck. And the whole way to the driveway, I could hear that music, not loud, but threaded through the air like a cold draft. And when I turned the key, the engine struggled. The battery light flashed. For a second, I thought it would not start, and that somehow that was part of it, that the house and the truck and the lights were in on something I could not see. But the engine caught on the second try, this rough, uneven rumble, and I drove. I did not think about where I was going until I saw the cemetery fence ahead, the reflective strips on the posts shining in the headlights like little eyes, and I pulled over without planning it, right here next to the bent section by the big oak where teenagers used to sneak in, the ground so hard from the cold that my tires barely left a mark. And I turned the engine off because it was making this high whine that sounded too much like that distant music. And the silence that followed was worse, because underneath it, I could still hear something faint, a slow beat, like footsteps on distant pavement. And I checked the time and saw it was exactly 3. And I realized I had lost almost 3 hours. I cannot account for between when the lights flickered and when I grabbed my keys. Time that is just gone from my head, and I am scared to try and pull at it, scared of what might come back if I remember. So I am sitting here, watching the gate, watching the thin strip of road that runs along the cemetery. And every now and then, the wind moves the plastic flowers, and they tap against the stones in a little rhythm that matches the beat in that tune. And I know how this sounds. I know, but listen, there is more. There is something I did not tell anyone, not even you at first. Back on that first night when I parked at Chapel Street, when the marchers went past heading toward Old Hill, I saw a kid near the lamppost, maybe 12 or 13, no coat, just a hoodie, standing closer to the curb than the rest. His eyes wide like he was seeing something he was not supposed to. And one of the masked figures, not the one that looked like Mark, but the one behind it, turned its head toward him for a second, and the kid flinched, took a step back, and then someone I could not see clearly grabbed his shoulder and pulled him into the crowd. And the next day at the shop, I heard someone mention that a boy from over by the tracks had not come home that night, that maybe he had run away, and I did not say anything. And tonight, when the radio went strange, I saw a corner of paper sticking out from under my front door as I was leaving, like someone had slipped it there, and I almost did not pick it up, but I did. And it was the same plain white, the same black ink. Midnight Procession, December 12th. Route from Chapel Street to Old Hill. But this time, there was a small line at the bottom that had not been there before. Smaller font, like it did not want to be noticed. It said, "Participants assemble by the fence." And the word participants made my throat go dry, because I realized they had changed the route. Or maybe I had just not seen that line the first time, and it meant people like me, people who watched, people who recorded nothing, were now expected somewhere specific. And that somewhere is exactly where I am sitting now, by this fence that rattles in the wind, with the graves just on the other side, the headstones leaning in the dark. Some of the names so worn down you can only read the dates, and even those look wrong if you stare too long, like they shift a year forward, then backward when the clouds move over the moon. And I cannot make myself get out of the truck, but I also cannot bring myself to drive away, because every time I touch the key, I hear that whisper again, my name in Mark's voice, right by my ear, and somewhere underneath that, softer, like it is coming from under the ground, my name again in voices I do not recognize, stacked on top of each other in a low chant that does not match the rhythm of my heartbeat anymore. And I keep thinking about the poster I saw earlier today on the bulletin board at the grocery store, half hidden behind the holiday sale sign, how it showed a row of masked figures, and how, at the very edge, just where the tape covered part of it, there was a mask that looked unfinished, the features sketched in faint lines. And now, when I close my eyes even for a second, I can see that same outline filling in. The features sharpening, and it is my face, older maybe, more tired, but mine. And I am afraid that if I blink too long, when that music finally reaches this stretch of road, when the marching sound comes up from Chapel Street and turns along the cemetery fence, I will open my eyes and be standing on the wrong side of this windshield, feet crunching on the gravel, something smooth and painted strapped over my skin, eyes staring straight ahead at the hill where there are no lights, only rows of stones waiting. And the worst part, the part that keeps making my hands shake on this wheel, is that some small piece of me, the part that is so tired of not knowing, wants to find out what it feels like to march with them, to see what they see when there are no holes in the mask. And I know if I give in to that, if I open the door and step out and follow the route like the paper says, there will not be a recording next year either. There will just be one more empty video, one more kid. No one remembers seeing by the lamppost. One more mask added on some poster in town, some picture someone glances at and then forgets, while the pattern keeps repeating every December. Perfectly on time, whether anyone talks about it or not. So this is why I am talking now, into this cracked screen, in this dead hour, parked by a graveyard fence with a car that might not start again. Because if I stay quiet, I think the parade wins. And if I drive away, I think it will just find another route, another hill, another cemetery, another small town where the flyers show up and vanish again. And maybe, just maybe, if I tell you exactly how it starts, with pancakes and an oil stain on a shirt and a simple white flyer that never shows up online, you will think twice before you follow any music that no one else seems to hear, before you stand by any fence at midnight when December feels too still. And if you ever see a plain piece of paper that says Midnight Procession with no sponsor logos and no smiling clip art, I need you to throw it away and take the long way home, even if it means passing 3 extra stop signs. And if you absolutely have to drive past a cemetery at night, turn your radio up so loud you cannot hear anything else, and never, ever slow down when you see people walking in perfect step with a song that does not seem to come from anywhere. Because I am telling you, man, I am telling you, as someone who has already heard the first notes coming up the road again, once they put your face on that mask, they do not need your permission to march. My name's Daniel Mercer. I'm from a place called Ridley Cross, out past the edge of Lexington, and I work as a delivery driver for a parts warehouse, the kind where your hands always smell like cardboard dust and motor oil, no matter how much you wash them. And right now, I'm sitting in my car by the cemetery gate outside Pine Hollow, and the battery light keeps flickering, and I am trying not to look at the fence on my right while I tell you this, man. So just listen, please, because I need to get it out before something else changes, before the road decides it wants me back again. And I swear to God, this is exactly how it happened. This is not a story. This is just the one day where everything went wrong in a way that does not fit anywhere in my head, and I have been trying to pretend it was nothing. But I can't drive past any headstones now without feeling that same tilt in my stomach. So yeah, I am talking into my cracked phone at 3 in the morning, in front of a cemetery fence like some crazy person. But I know what I saw and what I didn't see, and that is worse. Okay, let me start normal. Because it was a normal day. It was too normal. That is what messes me up the most. I can remember what I had for breakfast, and I can remember the stupid stain on my shirt clearer than I remember my own birthday right now. I rolled out of bed late that morning, not by much, just enough that I skipped the shower and went straight for the kitchen. There was half a leftover sausage biscuit from the night before in the fridge, wrapped in that waxy fast food paper, so I threw it in the microwave, drank tap water while it spun, checked my phone while I was chewing, scrolled weather, nothing special, cloudy, maybe some fog and low spots. That is what the app said. And my brother Kyle texted me a picture of the truck he had just picked up from a guy in town, beat up old Ford he wanted to fix up. And I remember I got grease on my gray work shirt from that biscuit. One perfect dark circle right under the logo of the warehouse. And I thought about changing, but decided not to. Because who cares? Nobody at the loading dock is looking at my chest that close, right? And I checked the time. It was a little after 7 in the morning. I remember the numbers. And I grabbed my keys and my delivery manifest and headed out. It felt like any other morning. The sky, that dull white, where you can't tell if the sun is really up behind it or not. The kind that makes you squint anyway. I drove to the warehouse, clocked in, scanned my badge. Normal beep, normal smell of coffee and dust and exhaust from the trucks that already left. And my supervisor handed me the stack of drop tickets and slapped the roof of my van like he always does. Said something about me getting the long route because I drive faster than the old guys. And I laughed and told him. As long as the van didn't die on me, I didn't care. Which is the kind of thing you say without thinking. And now it sits wrong in my chest. And the whole morning was just roads and parking lots and back doors of shops. Signing for brake pads and filters and boxes of little things. And my brain was in that autopilot where your hands steer, but you don't really feel like you're the one making choices. And then right after lunch, the whole day turned toward Pine Hollow without me really noticing. That is how it starts, not with some big sign, just a name on the next ticket. I ate a turkey sandwich in the van, in a parking lot of a strip mall, and the bread was a little stale, and it squeaked against my teeth, and I remember thinking I needed to tell Kyle we should get barbecue that weekend. And then I flipped the next sheet and saw Pine Hollow written in that crooked print the office woman uses. And I thought, great, that's out in the hills, long drive, but at least it gets me away from traffic. And I texted Kyle on my break, said, hey, you want to ride shotgun out to Pine Hollow on my last run? We can swing by that junkyard you like. He texted back, yeah, pick me up. And that is why he was with me. That is why there were 2 of us in the van when the road stopped behaving. And I keep telling myself I didn't imagine it because he was there, even if he won't talk about it now, even if he shuts down when I bring up the cemetery fence. So after my second to last drop, I drove by the house he was working at. He was under the hood of that blue Ford. And I honked, and he wiped his hands on a rag, jumped in, tossed the rag on the floorboard, the whole van smelling like gasoline and sweat. And he made fun of the stain on my shirt. And we argued about music, and the GPS on my phone told me Pine Hollow was like an hour or so away, out past some places we didn't know. And the day was already leaning toward late afternoon by then. That weird time where it's not dark, but the light feels tired, like it wants to quit early. And we were just driving, man, like people do, past empty fields and those houses that look like they've been there since before any of us were born. And we weren't thinking about cemeteries or anything. We were thinking about the job because we had one last stop at a little mechanic in Pine Hollow, and we wanted to get there before they closed, so I wouldn't have to bring the parts back across the county. And we hit that sign that said Pine Hollow with bullet holes in it. And Kyle took a picture and said something dumb, like, "Welcome to the set of a horror movie," which I wish he hadn't said. I know that doesn't mean anything, but it hangs in my head now anyway. You hit the town, and it's small, smaller than I expected. Couple of old brick buildings, gas station with 2 pumps, diner with those letters missing from the sign. And the GPS told us to stay on the main road through, then take a right past the church. And there's this little hillside cemetery up there. You can see it plain as day. It's on the right side, up a bit, fenced in with chain link, white stones leaning different directions on the hill, trees along the top, like it's watching the town from above. And there's this road that runs along the bottom of the hill, right by the fence. And that was supposed to be our right turn. That is important. Remember that, because that road, that strip of asphalt, hugging the cemetery fence, that is where everything bent. But at first, it was fine. At first, it was just a right turn by some old graves. The church bell tower was behind us, and I remember thinking it looked like every small town I'd ever delivered to. I even said out loud that it reminded me of a place we used to visit when we were kids. And Kyle leaned over the wheel and said the hill looked crooked, not in a haunted way, just in that way where heavy rain has washed dirt out from under some stones. And we both saw this one big stone near the fence with a bunch of plastic flowers at its base, faded red and yellow ones, and a little American flag stuck in the ground, barely moving in the breeze. And I remember that detail because it was so normal, just someone's grave, someone's family, and the gate to that cemetery was on our right as we turned, open just a little, like someone had gone in or out not long before, and the sky looked dimmer than it had even a few minutes back. But whatever, clouds, hills, you don't think about it. We turned, we followed the GPS, and the road narrowed right away, house on the left, fence and headstones above us on the right, the gravel shoulder crunching under the van tires when I drifted. And the GPS voice in my phone said, "Stay on this road for a while." And the map showed a curve, and then another, and then the mechanic's shop down on the other side of the hill. Simple, nothing strange. And for the first mile or so, it was like that. Curves, a little dip, the cemetery above us, then out of sight, trees pressing close, and the air in the van got colder. I remember reaching to turn down the fan because I thought I had it up too high, but the dial was already low, and Kyle rubbed his arms and said it felt like we had driven into a basement. And he meant the temperature, that damp kind of chill, even though it was late afternoon and we had been warm 10 minutes before. And I laughed it off and said we were in the hills, shade does that, and we came around a bend and saw that barn for the first time, or what I am calling a barn, because I don't know what else to call it. It was sitting out on the right side, beyond a field, not far from where the cemetery hill leveled out, leaning, all gray boards, and a rusted roof, one of those big doors hanging crooked, the other shut, one busted window up top, the kind of thing you see all over rural Kentucky. And I noticed it just long enough to think somebody should tear that down before a storm does it for them. And then the road curved left, and it was gone behind the trees, and we both forgot about it, I think, until the second time. Okay, this is where it starts to go off. So listen, I know you can say country roads loop around. I know that. I drive them. I get it, but this wasn't that. My phone buzzed. GPS voice cut off mid-sentence. The map went blank for a second, like it couldn't load. Just that spinning circle, you know the one. And then it came back and showed us behind where I knew we had just been. Like it had rewound us, like we had reversed on the map, even though we were driving forward, and I thought it glitched. I even smacked the side of the phone against the dashboard, like that does anything. And Kyle laughed and said we were in a dead zone. That was his joke. And I told him to shut up and watch for the shop sign in case the GPS lost its mind. And a minute later, we came around a curve, and there was that barn again. Same angle, same busted window, same crooked door, same patch of weeds in the gravel shoulder near where the field started. And I said, "Didn't we just pass that?" And Kyle got quiet and leaned forward and looked hard and said, "Yeah, same place, same dented metal gate leaned up against the fence." And then he tried to backtrack it. Said no, could be another barn. You see a lot of barns that look alike out here. But his voice didn't sound convinced, and I felt that little pinch in my chest. That tiny wrongness, like when you're walking stairs in the dark, and your foot hits the step before you think it will. And I told myself it was fine. I told myself we had turned ourselves around without noticing, that the GPS had rerouted us, and when it told us to stay on the road, I obeyed. Because what else do you do? The cemetery hill wasn't on our right anymore. It was behind us, I thought. And trees on both sides were closer now, branches overhead like a tunnel. And the sky was duller, like the day had skipped forward. But I checked the dashboard clock, and it didn't match that feeling. The numbers had only moved a little, not enough. And Kyle said he felt like he'd missed a nap somewhere. His exact words, and the road dipped again. And the van hit a bump, and I gripped the wheel, and we came around another curve. And this time there was a sign. And this is important, because that sign was not there the first time through. And nobody put up a sign in the 10 minutes between. It was one of those white reflective road signs with black letters, and it just said Cemetery Road, with an arrow pointing straight ahead. But we were already on the road that came from the cemetery. We had literally just driven down from under it, and both of us stared at it, and after we passed it, Kyle twisted around to look, and his face went pale because there was nothing behind it on the post, just the one sign, no other road name, no other arrows, like that was its entire purpose, just to tell you this was the road that belonged to the graves. And I remember the hairs standing up on my arms in a way they never do, just from cool air, I'm telling you. And I said, maybe there was a junction up ahead where it actually turned into something else. Maybe someone just labeled all of it that way. And I kept driving, because what else do? You don't throw the van in reverse on a narrow hill road. That's how you end up in a ditch. So we followed it, and the GPS tried again. The little arrow of our van spinning on the empty gray background. Not on any line, just floating. And then it snapped onto one that looked like the one we had already been on. And I told myself it was recalculating, that this is just how these things work. And then we saw the barn again. Man, the third time, same angle, same broken window, same leaning door. Except no, the door was not leaning the same way. I didn't realize it at first until Kyle grabbed my arm and said, "Did you see that?" and made me slow down. The big wooden door that had been hanging to the left like it was about to fall off was now sort of centered, like someone had nudged it, like it had shifted in its hinges, closing more than before, but not all the way. And the weeds at the edge of the gravel were bent differently, like a tire had pressed them. But we hadn't stopped there. We hadn't gone near that shoulder. And I know how that sounds. I know it sounds like we weren't paying attention the first time, but I swear I am not mixing them up. It was wrong, the kind of wrong that makes you feel like you're standing in someone else's house by mistake. And I hit the brakes and almost stopped right there on the road. And Kyle said, "Keep going, don't stop. Why would you stop?" And his voice had that edge in it that meant he was actually scared, not just messing around. So I eased off the gas, but kept rolling, watching the barn in the side mirror until trees blocked it again. And the air in the van felt thick, like sitting in a room where someone has been crying for a while. That weird, heavy feeling. And my hands were sweating on the wheel and leaving prints. And I said out loud, "Okay, this is a loop. This is stupid. We missed a turn. Let's just turn around next wide spot and go back to the church." And Kyle said, Yeah, that's all. We just missed the shop. Small town. Easy to pass something." But he wouldn't look at the GPS anymore. He just stared out the windshield and kept licking his lips. And I turned the radio on for noise, and it was only static. No stations. Not even the one we'd been listening to when we came through town 20 minutes before. Just white noise. And I turned it off right away because it made my skin crawl worse. And that is when we saw the old man for the first time. He was standing by the right side of the road, near where the trees opened up again, toward what I knew in my gut was going to be that barn. Only we saw him before the barn this time, like he was placed further up the road. He had one of those long, dark coats on, the old heavy ones you see old farmers in, and a hat pulled down. And he had a stick in one hand, and he wasn't hitchhiking. He wasn't waving. He wasn't doing anything. Just standing a few feet back from the shoulder, turned almost, but not quite toward us, like he'd been watching the field and heard us coming. And I slowed a little, because you do that when you see someone that close to the road. And as we passed, I glanced at his face, and I flinched, not because it was monstrous or anything, but because it felt like looking straight at a photograph that someone had slightly smeared. His features made sense. Nose, mouth, eyes. But it was like they were not in the right position. Like maybe his eyes were a bit too low, or his mouth too wide. But if you tried to pin it down, you couldn't. It was like when you see your reflection in a warped window, and you can't say exactly what is wrong. You just know it is not you. And I jerked my gaze back to the road and asked Kyle if he saw him. And Kyle said, "Yeah, I saw him." And his voice cracked on that last word. And then we came around the bend, and there was the barn again. And I knew before I saw it that it would be there. And this time the door was closed, fully closed. Both sides, no gap you could see through. And there were shapes in the cracks between the boards that weren't light, just darker darkness. And I pressed the gas a little harder just to get past it. And then the GPS finally decided it knew where we were. And it said in that calm voice, "Make a U-turn when possible." And I laughed once. The kind of laugh that hurts your throat because there was nowhere to turn. The road was a narrow line with steep ditches on both sides. And Kyle said, "Did you see his face, man? Did you see his face?" And he started repeating it, and I told him to stop, to just stop. And I promised we'd turn around as soon as there was a driveway or a little gravel pull-off. And he said we already passed one, and I told him no, we didn't. I had been looking. And then he pointed ahead and said like that one. And up there, I swear, was a little gravel drive off to the left that I had not seen any of the times before, leading up to a mailbox and a house hidden by trees, like it had been dropped there between one breath and the next. And my heart hammered because that road sign had showed up between passes too, remember? And I slowed down and said, "Okay, we'll pull in there, turn around, go back past the church." And I signaled like there was anyone behind me and turned into that drive. And the gravel under the tires sounded too loud, too crisp, like someone amplifying it in my ears. And I eased up just enough to turn the wheel to angle us back out. And Kyle put his hand on the dash like he was bracing for a crash. And right then we both heard it, faint but clear, over the sound of the van. This steady crunch of gravel behind us, like another set of tires coming along the road. Slow, measured, and I froze. And Kyle twisted around and looked out the back window, and there was nothing there. No car, no truck, no dust, no headlights, nothing. Just the road and the trees, but the sound of tires on gravel kept coming. Closer. Same rhythm as if something was rolling right up on us, and I slammed the van into drive and shot back out onto the road the way we'd come, like some scared animal. And the noise stopped at the exact moment the front tires hit the pavement, like it had been tied to that. And I nearly clipped the mailbox, and Kyle shouted that I was going to get us killed, and I screamed back that we weren't staying there. And then we were on the road again, headed, I thought, back toward town and the church and that open gate. But the GPS said we were still going the same direction we had been all along, deeper in, not back out. And my stomach dropped, and I had this sick thought that maybe both directions were the same now. Like the road didn't care which way we pointed the van. It was just feeding us through the same loop again and again. And that is when I started praying under my breath. Nothing fancy, just little words like please and help, and the trees opened again. And there was the barn. Fourth time, door still closed. But now there was a light in that upper window. A faint yellow, flickering kind of light, like a candle or an old bulb, where there had been nothing before. And my chest hurt so bad, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. And Kyle started hitting the dashboard with his fist and saying no, 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 like a kid. And his voice cracked all the way up into this high sound I'd never heard from him. And I drove faster, the van rattling around the curves, my hands shaking so hard I could barely keep between the ditches. And somewhere in there, he told me to stop by the old man, to talk to him, to ask him directions, that maybe we had just freaked ourselves out, and he was real and normal. And I said I didn't want to stop for anyone on that road, not with the way the GPS was spinning and the barn changing like it had been touched between passes. But then we came around a bend, and there he was again. Same coat, same hat, by the right side of the road near the shoulder. And this time he was closer, standing almost at the edge of the gravel, like he'd moved a few feet forward. And his head was tilted, and he was looking at us full on. No more pretending he was watching the field, just straight at the van. And I could feel it before I met his eyes, like heat on my skin, that sense of being watched. And I swear to God, his face was different. His jaw narrower, his nose longer, his eyes set wider apart. But in a way that would not sound crazy if you told someone. Just enough that every time you remember it, the details slip, and I wanted to keep going. I wanted to blow past him, but my foot moved to the brake all on its own, like someone else was working the pedals, and we rolled to a stop a few yards past him. And Kyle was saying something like, "Ask him where the mechanic is, man. Just ask. Just see if he says something normal." And I put the van in park, and my hands were shaking, and the engine idled rough, and I could hear the tick of it and my own heart pounding, and that sound of gravel again, even though we weren't moving. This soft grind like someone shifting weight back and forth, and I opened my window a little, just a crack, enough to talk through, and the air that came in felt wrong. It smelled like damp wood and cut grass and something old, like closets that have been shut for too long, and I called out to him, "Sir, is there a way back to the church from here? We keep getting turned around," and he didn't move for a second. And then he took one step toward the van, perfect, smooth step, like he had been rehearsing it. And his coat didn't rustle the way fabric does, and the stick in his hand didn't scrape the ground. It was all quiet except for that gravel sound that did not match the way his boots were landing. And he smiled, or at least the bottom half of his face smiled, and his eyes didn't. And he said, "You're already there, son." Same calm voice as the GPS. That same rhythm, and my skin crawled so hard, I thought it was going to slide off my bones. And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "You passed through the gate, didn't you?" And I thought he meant the cemetery gate, back where we had turned right. And I shook my head and said no. We stayed on the road. We didn't go in. We just took the road by the fence. And he tilted his head the other way, like a bird, and said, "The fence is for you, not for them." And I looked at Kyle, and his knuckles were white, on the edge of his seat. And he whispered, "Roll the window up, Dan. Roll it up now." And I couldn't. Not right away. I was stuck there. And I asked the old man again, "Is there a turn, a driveway, something that goes back toward town?" And he just said, "Town is where the living are. And you came here." And he lifted his stick and pointed past us, not toward the barn, but toward the curve in the road we hadn't taken yet, the one that always led us back to the same place. And I rolled the window up then, fast, my fingers clumsy on the button, and as the glass slid up, I swear his face changed again, just subtly, his chin shorter, his eyes smaller, like clay being pressed between hands, and Kyle shouted at me to go. And I threw the van into drive and took off. And in the side mirror, I could see him standing in the same spot again, just exactly where he'd been when we first saw him, like he'd been reset, no motion between, and this cold washed over me that had nothing to do with the air. And I think that is when I really knew, deep in my chest, that the road wasn't just twisting funny. It was not a place we were supposed to be anymore. It was like a strip of film someone had cut out and looped, and we were inside it. And the hill with the graves up above, and the fence along the first stretch were part of what pinned it down, and we were stupid enough to drive along it. I don't know how many times we went around after that, because the clock stopped lining up. The dash clock and my phone and Kyle's watch, they all said different things every time we checked, sometimes earlier, sometimes later, like time was sliding around us while we kept circling. The sky stuck in that same tired light, never really getting darker or brighter, and the barn kept changing a little each loop. Door open again. But now both sides hanging. Door closed, but the window boarded from the inside. No light, then light again. A stronger light that threw a shape against the boards, like someone was moving around inside. And the old man, he was there every time too, but sometimes further up the road, sometimes closer to the barn, sometimes with his back half turned, sometimes looking straight at us. And every time his face was just slightly off in a new way, like someone was trying to remember him from a dream and kept messing up the details. And the sign that said, "Cemetery Road," it swapped sides once. We both saw it. I almost drove off the pavement because of it. One pass, it was on the right, dirty, leaning. The next, it was on the left, clean, like a brand new sign. And then the next time it was gone, just the empty post. and the GPS started saying different things, like turn left, then right, then make a U-turn, even though there were no intersections. And once it said, continue straight for a long distance, and the map showed no road at all. Just that little arrow moving over blank space. And I started thinking about that open gate back at the cemetery, the one we passed when we first turned off by the hill, and I realized I had not seen it again. I had not seen the hill again at all, just the trees and the barn, and that man and that stupid white sign, like the space between the church and wherever the road actually went, had been cut out, and we were stuck on the piece that someone had kept, and my throat got tight and my eyes burned, and I told Kyle I was sorry. I don't even know what I was apologizing for, and he was rocking in his seat, whispering that we should just stop. We should just stop the van in the middle of the road and get out and walk, that maybe the problem was the van, and that made something in me flare, this hot panic, and I shouted, no, do not get out. Nowhere on that road looked like a place you could stand, if that makes sense. Like the ground itself didn't want you, like it was only there to be driven over. And I gripped the wheel so hard my hands hurt for days afterward. And I decided I was done listening to the GPS, done following the curves the way the road wanted. And when we came around and saw the barn again, with the door cracked just enough that the shadow inside looked like it was turned toward us, I did the only thing I could think of that the road would not expect. And that sounds crazy, I know, thinking about a road like it has plans. But that is how it felt. I yanked the wheel hard left, onto the field, off the pavement, wheels bumping over dirt and tufts of grass. And Kyle screamed, and the van lurched and rattled, and the sound under us changed, gravel to soil. And I aimed for the barbed wire fence on the far side of the field, just wanting to break out of that loop somehow, thinking we could cut through to some other road, or even get stuck and walk out in a straight line. Anything except another pass by that barn. And that man. And that shifting sign. And for a second, it worked. The barn was on our right, closer than ever. And I could see through the crack in the door, and there was nothing inside. Not emptiness, not darkness, nothing. Like the space just stopped. And then the front wheels hit something I couldn't see. A hard jolt like a curb, even though there hadn't been one, and my head snapped forward. And the van stalled, engine dying all at once. No coughing, just silence. And the air went dead still, and the light outside dimmed like someone had turned a dial. And in that silence, we both heard it. Behind us, not on the road anymore, but right up close, the crunch of gravel, one slow step at a time, circling. Except there was no gravel under the van now. Only field, only dry grass and dirt. But the sound was the same, and Kyle started crying, quiet, hitching sobs, and I twisted the key in the ignition. Nothing, no click, no attempt to turn over, like the battery had been ripped out. And I looked down, and every gauge on the dash was dead. No lights, no needle, like the van had never been turned on in its life. And my phone screen went black, even though it had plenty of charge before, and the only light left was this gray, sour light outside. And the crunching sound moved toward the driver's side, and I could feel it more than hear it, like pressure, and my hand went to the door handle, not to open it, just to hold it, like that would keep it shut. And I whispered, please, please, I don't know who to, maybe to whoever keeps roads where they belong. And there was a shadow on the glass of my window then. Not the shape of a man, not exactly. Too tall, too narrow at the top, like someone had stacked pieces of the wrong body on top of each other. And I closed my eyes, because I couldn't look, I just couldn't. And Kyle grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises and said, he's at your window, Dan. And I said, I know. And then, clear as anything, right by my ear, not muffled by the glass at all, I heard that same calm voice from the roadside, saying, you already came through, and there is no back, only through, and my stomach flipped, and I think I might have blacked out, not all the way, just one of those little dropouts where time stutters. because the next thing I remember is the engine roaring to life under my hands, even though I don't remember twisting the key again, and all the dash lights blazing as bright as if they'd never gone off, and my phone screen lighting up with so many missed GPS notices that it froze, and the van lurched forward. Though my foot was still on the brake, just a little, like someone had shoved us, pushed the whole vehicle from behind, and the front wheels bumped back up onto pavement, and we were on the road again, perfectly aligned. No field, no barn, nothing but asphalt ahead. And the sky was different. The color shifted, the clouds broken up like after a rain. And on my right, instead of that field and that impossible barn, there was a steep hill with a chain link fence at the top and rows of headstones leaning on a slope, and an open metal gate a few yards up, like the one we had passed what felt like hours before. And the church steeple was ahead of us. Closer than it should have been, just around a little bend. And my hands were shaking so bad, I thought I was going to drop the wheel. And Kyle was gasping like he'd run a marathon. And the GPS said in that same calm voice, "In a few moments, turn left onto Main Street." And the map on the screen showed us right back where we had started, just pulling away from the cemetery hill, as if none of the loops had happened. And the dash clock said it was barely later than when we first turned off. Like maybe 10 minutes, 15 at most. And my brain just refused that. It refused it the way your eyes refuse to focus on a weird optical illusion. And I kept driving, straight past the church. No way was I turning toward the mechanic now. I didn't care about the job. I didn't care if I got fired. I just wanted out of Pine Hollow. And I turned left when the GPS said to, but only because that was the way to the highway. Not because I trusted it. And Kyle didn't say a word. Not one. He just stared straight ahead with his hands and fists on his knees. And we drove past the gas station and the diner and the bullet-ridden town sign. And I didn't breathe easy until the buildings thinned and the road widened and the hills pulled back. And even then, it felt like something was still watching us in the rear view. Like the loop hadn't really let go yet. Just stretched, and maybe we were still inside it and didn't know. And about 20 miles out, when we were sure we were back in the normal world, we pulled into a truck stop because I felt sick and I needed to see other people, real people, walking around under lights that stayed where they were supposed to. And we parked by the pumps and sat there for a minute. And finally Kyle spoke, voice raw, and said, "Did that happen?" And I said, "Yeah." And then we both got out without talking and went inside and walked around like we were trying to remember how to be regular, picking up snacks we didn't eat, staring at the news on the TV, hearing the ordinary sounds of cash registers and kids whining. And it all felt fake, like a set someone had built for our benefit. And I went up to the counter after a while to pay for gas. And the cashier was an older guy with a name tag. Real normal. And I don't know why I did it. Maybe I wanted someone to laugh and say I was crazy, so I could let it go. But I asked him, trying to sound casual, "Hey, you know Pine Hollow, right?" And he snorted and said, "Everybody around here knows Pine Hollow. What about it?" And I said, "I was delivering there. I think we took a wrong turn by the cemetery. You know that hillside one by the church. We ended up by some old barn that isn't on the GPS." And the minute I said it, his face changed. Not in the way the old man's did, not physically, just in expression. His eyes went a little flat, and he leaned on the counter and said, "There's no barns out that way anymore, not old ones at least." And I said, "What do you mean anymore?" And he shrugged and said, "There used to be one along the road behind the cemetery, but they tore it down years ago when the roof caved in. Nothing left but a concrete slab and a couple of posts." And my stomach dropped so hard, I had to grab the counter. And I said, "Are you sure?" And he gave me a look like I was insulting his memory and said I hauled some of the wood off there myself, used it for a shed. Trust me, no barns. And I didn't know what to say. My mouth went dry. And I asked him if he ever heard about people getting turned around on that road, like it looping or something. And he frowned and said, "There's no road back there now, except the one that goes up to the cemetery parking lot. Not one that runs along the fence, just the main street past the church and then the highway out. and my skin went cold again because I could still feel the van's tires slipping on that narrow asphalt by the chain link. I could still see the faded plastic flowers and the little flag that wouldn't move in the wind. And I realized that what we had driven along was not in his world at all. It had been ours only. A strip of something inserted between the town and the graves, and we had stepped onto it without knowing. And the only reason we were standing at that counter was because something somewhere had decided to spit us back out. I didn't sleep that night. I hardly sleep any night anymore. Not really. Not the deep kind. Not since that day. And I can't. I can't drive past any cemetery without my hands starting to sweat on the wheel and my heart pounding. I change routes now, like an old person who refuses the highway. I will take 10 extra minutes to go around just so I don't have to see headstones through a fence at the corner of my eye. And if I can't avoid it, if there's no other way, I turn the radio up and stare straight ahead, and I do not look at the hill because I am afraid I'll see some extra gate open that shouldn't be there. Some road peeling away from the normal one, waiting for my tires to touch it. And I listen to the sound of the pavement, and I wait for it to change to that too loud gravel, that wrong crunch. And sometimes I swear I hear it, even when there is no gravel anywhere near. Just for a second, a little echo from that loop, like the road wants to remind me it exists. And I check the GPS too often. I stare at the little arrow, making sure it stays on roads that other people know about, that show up on truck stop maps, and in old-timers' stories, because the idea of that arrow floating over blank space again makes my knees weak. And my brother, he doesn't ride with me anymore. He barely drives at all himself if he can help it. He says the loops make his head hurt. When he thinks about them, that was his phrase. And when I try to bring up Pine Hollow, he shuts down, changes the subject, or just gets up and leaves. Like ignoring it will keep it from finding him again. And maybe he's right. Maybe I'm the stupid one for sitting here with my phone, talking to nobody, reliving every second. But I can't not, because there are pieces I still don't understand. Like why the clocks lied, why the sky stuck, why the old man's face would not stay put. And most of all, what he meant when he said we had already come through, like there was some boundary we had crossed without seeing it. Some gate that wasn't the metal one on the hill. And I keep wondering if that day was the first time, or if we'd been close before, driving past other cemeteries without paying attention. And it just didn't catch us then. And that thought makes my skin crawl worse than the memory of anything we actually saw, because it means this isn't locked to one town in Kentucky. One stupid little loop of road and a barn that isn't there anymore. It could be anywhere. There are graves and a fence, and a turn your GPS doesn't recognize. Just waiting for someone a little distracted, someone on autopilot to slide onto it, and then the world will tilt for them like it did for us. And maybe they won't get shoved back out onto Main Street with the church steeple in front of them and their engine roaring like nothing happened. Maybe they'll keep going. One more loop, one more pass by a building that keeps changing, one more look at a person who doesn't wear his face the same way twice, until finally there is nothing left of the original road at all. No way back to the town, or the truck stop, or the normal cashier who swears that what you saw does not exist. And when I think about that, I grip the steering wheel so hard I can feel my pulse in my fingers, even when the van is parked like it is now. Engine off, battery light staring at me, and the fence to my right humming this soft metallic sound in the wind. And I keep checking the cemetery gate to make sure it's closed, that it stays closed. Because if I see it swing open just a little on its own, I am putting this car in gear. Even if the battery dies and I have to push it, I am not taking another road that runs along a graveyard. I am not letting any GPS tell me it found a faster way. Not ever again. And I know how I sound. I know. But I'm telling you, man, the day was normal. The time was right. The truck was real. The hill was there. The flowers, the flag, the sign, the barn, the old man. And the thing that breaks my head is that when I drove back through Pine Hollow a week later, just to prove to myself I was crazy, I swear to God, there was nothing there behind the church except the hill and the cemetery parking lot entrance. No narrow road, no white sign, no field, no slab where a barn had been, just headstones on the slope and that same chain link fence. And the gate was shut tight, like it had never been open in its life. And the GPS showed only one route through town, clean, simple, and I've been changing my routes ever since, moving my life around any place where the dead are lined up behind a fence. Because I can't shake the feeling that once a road has you, it always knows how to find you again. And I am not taking that chance. Not after Pine Hollow, not after the loops, not after the barn that isn't there anymore. And the voice that sounded exactly like a navigation app, telling me in that flat, calm way that there is no back, only through. My name's Daniel Mercer. I'm from a little place outside Shelby, Ohio, that people just call the Junction, and I work as a long-haul freight driver. And right now, I am sitting in my car, across from our town cemetery, with the battery light on, and my hands shaking so bad, I keep almost dropping the phone. And I am telling you this because if I do not get it out of my head, I am not going to sleep again. And I need you to understand that what happened to me in Oregon at that motel was real. It was not a dream. It was not a story someone told me. It was me. It was my body in that room and my breath in that air. And I have not felt warm since that night, no matter how many layers I put on. I remember the day way too clearly for how ordinary it started. That is part of why it gets to me, because nothing about it felt special until it did. So I got up around 6. The old alarm on my phone went off, and I was already half awake because I never sleep great. When I know I have a long run, my back was stiff from the last load, and I went into the kitchen and made the same breakfast I always make when I am on the road schedule. 2 eggs in a pan, toast that comes out more dry than browned because our toaster runs hot, weak coffee because I always think I am going to cut back on caffeine. And then I end up grabbing an energy drink at some truck stop anyway. And I sat at the table in that gray light that comes in before the sun actually shows up and stared at the magnet calendar on the fridge, like that was going to tell me not to go. But it did not. It was just another square with some numbers on it. I remember looking down and seeing the dark blue shirt I had pulled on, the one with the company logo over the pocket, and that little grease stain near the bottom from where I wiped my hand on it a few months back, and it never washed out. And I thought about changing it, and then I told myself it did not matter, because nobody looks at you when you are hauling freight, except for when you are in the way. So I left it on, pulled on my work jeans and my boots with the worn laces and the heel that squeaks a little, grabbed my cap off the hook by the door, checked the time again, 6:32, and headed out. The air was still cold back home. Not like Oregon cold, but enough that you see a little cloud when you breathe. And I scraped the thin frost off my windshield with the same gas receipt I had in the console, fired up the pickup, and drove over to where the rig was parked behind the warehouse. And it was all just normal, man. Boring, logbook check, quick walk around the trailer, lights, tires, all of it. Dispatch had told me the day before that I had to run out toward the coast, drop in some small distribution center outside a town I had never heard of in Oregon. And I remember thinking it would be nice to see something green again, because some of my routes are just endless, brown, flat, nothing. But that is not how it felt when I finally got there. The day on the road was long, but not bad. Miles of interstate, truck stops that all look the same, the usual stuff, the same songs on the radio that I turn up and then down, and then off. The same snacks, jerky and cheap chips. Hours watching taillights and counting the signs for towns I never actually see. And I only remember little bits. A state trooper who had someone pulled over, a kid at a rest area with a toy truck staring at my rig like it was a spaceship, the way the sky got heavier the farther west I drove, clouds thickening and dropping lower until they felt like they were just above the top of the trailer. By the time I crossed into Oregon, it was late afternoon, and the light had that flat, tired look it gets on days where you never really see the sun. And I kept checking the GPS and the paper directions the company gave me because I do not trust either of them on their own. And it kept telling me I needed to get off the main highway because my delivery point was down some smaller road that wound through a couple of little places. I was supposed to deliver the next morning, so the plan was to get close, shut down, sleep, and roll in at opening time. Nothing complicated, but the weather started changing fast. That is where I think it began. Not in the motel, not with the room, but with the way the temperature dropped when it really had no reason to. 1 hour, I was driving with the heater just cracked. The next, I had my hands wrapped around the wheel and they still felt cold, even with the vents blowing on them. And there was this fine drizzle that started. Not real rain. More like the air itself was damp, and the roads got shiny and dark, and the trees along the side of the 2-lane looked like they were getting swallowed by the gray. I took the exit I was supposed to, followed a narrow road that dipped and climbed, past a sign for some town that probably had a couple hundred people. And then for a while, it was just empty. No other headlights in front of me. No taillights behind me. Just my rig and that road and the way the drizzle sounded on the cab. I checked the time on the dash. It was a little after 7. And I started thinking about where I was going to sleep because I knew I was running up against my hours. And there was nothing but trees and dark. And the occasional driveway with a mailbox. Until I crested this small hill and saw a glow ahead. Not bright like a city. Just a little smear of light against the low clouds. And when I got closer, I could see it was a gas station, and across from that, a small, older-looking motel with a sign that said Cedar Heights Motel, even though there were no hills in sight right there. Just a gentle slope and then more trees. The gas station had that tired look, a couple of pumps, fluorescent lights buzzing, a guy inside reading something at the counter, and the motel sat next to it. A long single row of doors facing the road. 2 stories, paint kind of peeling on the railings, the sign flickering a bit, vacancy glowing steady. And I remember thinking it looked like the kind of place you stay when you are too tired to be picky, which was exactly where I was at. I pulled the rig into the wide gravel area on the side, eased it around so I would not block anything, set the brake, and sat there for a second looking at the motel, at the yellow light coming from the little office by the first door. And I had this dumb little thought that I should stay in the cab to save money. But the cab was already feeling cold and cramped, and I wanted a hot shower so bad, my shoulders ached just thinking about it. I grabbed my duffel, locked up, and walked across the gravel. My boots making that crunching sound, and the drizzle kind of stuck to my jacket. When I pushed open the office door, I got hit with warm air that smelled like coffee and some kind of cleaner. And there was a woman behind the counter, older than me, gray in her hair, wearing a maroon sweater with the motel name stitched on it. And she looked up over her glasses and gave me that automatic smile people give drivers when they see the logo on the shirt. I told her I needed a room for the night, just one, nothing fancy. And she tapped on this old computer and glanced past me like she was checking the lot, then said they had plenty of rooms. Asked me if I was okay parking the truck where it was, asked if I was alone, the usual stuff. And I signed the card slip and filled out the little registration card that still asked for a home phone number, even though I have not had one of those in years. She slid a key across the counter, a real metal key on one of those long plastic tags. And that is when she said it, just casually, not in a spooky voice or anything, just like she was giving me a heads up about the ice machine. She said, "You are in 12. We call it the cold room. Let me know if the heater acts up again. We had someone complain last week, but the guy we had look at it said everything tested fine." I laughed a little, more to be polite than because it was funny. And I said something like, "If it is cold, I will just throw another blanket on. I sleep in my cab half the time anyway." And she nodded and said there were extra blankets in the dresser if I needed them. And then she looked at me a second longer than I expected, like she was about to say something else. but then a phone rang in the back, and she seemed to snap out of it and waved me toward the door. I remember that little moment because it felt like a fork in the road, like she had a choice to warn me more or not, and she chose not, and I do not even blame her because I am not sure I would have believed anything she might have said, but it sits in my head in this weird way now. I walked along the outside walkway, passing doors with their numbers in metal frames. 11, 10, 9. Some of the curtains drawn tight, one with a TV flickering behind it. And the air out there was cool, but not bad. My breath only showing a little, my hands not hurting or anything. And I got to 12 and stuck the key in the lock and pushed the door open, and everything seemed normal. Just a plain cheap motel room with a bed, a little table, a chair, a dresser, a TV that looked older than I was, a small bathroom off to the side, plain art on the wall with some trees in it, nothing special. The only odd thing at first was that when I stepped inside, I felt this little bite of cold around my ankles, like the air near the floor was a different temperature than the air by my face. And I told myself it was just because the room had been empty and the heater had not caught up yet. I set my bag down on the chair, kicked the door shut, flipped the deadbolt, and walked over to the little wall unit heater, one of those combination heater and air conditioners under the window. And I turned the dial up until it clicked and hummed to life. And then I stood there, waiting, holding my hand out to feel the air. It was blowing, sure, but it was barely warm, just a hair above room temperature. And the room itself did not feel like it was changing at all. And I remember rubbing my arms and thinking about going back to the office. But then I told myself to quit being soft, that it would warm up while I was in the shower. And I took my clothes out and headed to the bathroom. The bathroom was even smaller than it looked from the room. Just a toilet, a sink, a mirror over it, and a little fiberglass shower with a curtain that had some kind of floral pattern faded on it. And when I stepped in there, it felt even colder, and I could see my breath clear as day in front of my face, more than I could out in the room. And I frowned and reached up to touch the mirror, and it was already fogged a little around the edges, like someone had just taken a hot shower, except the room was cold, and I had not even turned the water on yet. I stood there, my finger on the glass, and there was this oval patch in the center, at about face level, where the fog was thicker, like someone had stood there breathing on it for a long time. And I felt this stupid little pinch of irritation, because I thought housekeeping had done a bad job. Like maybe the last guest left it like that, and nobody wiped it down. And I wiped my hand across it, hard, until I could see my reflection. Tired eyes, red from the road, cap hair pushed down, and I said something under my breath about cheap motels, and turned the shower on. The water took forever to get warm. I kept my hand under it, shivering a little, and when it finally felt hot, I got in, and just stood there for a long time, letting it hit my shoulders and my neck, and trying not to think about anything. But I could not shake the feeling that the air, even with the hot steam, was not quite right. Like the steam did not move the way it usually does in a small bathroom. It kind of hung there, close to the wall, instead of filling the room. And more than once, I thought I saw a shape in it near the mirror. But every time I pulled the curtain back to check, there was nothing. Just the mirror, fogged again, my outline blurry in it. I told myself it was just my brain, tired from the drive. I finished up, dried off fast, because the minute I stepped out of the water, my skin goosebumped all over, and I wrapped the thin motel towel around my waist and wiped the mirror with my hand again. This is the part that does not line up with anything I know, and I need you to listen, because I have gone over it 100 times, and it never makes sense. I wiped the mirror clear. I saw my face, my hair damp, the little scar by my jaw from when a chain snapped years ago, and then I exhaled, just to prove to myself that the fog was coming from me now. And I watched it spread, but it did not spread from my mouth. It came from the side, like somebody standing just off my shoulder, out of frame, had breathed out hard toward the glass. The fog bloomed right where I was not, and there was this brief second where it looked like another shape next to my head, like the edge of another face. just the blur of it, and I froze, towel in one hand, other hand still on the sink, and this cold, not like a normal draft, but like walking into a meat locker, went straight through me. I spun around so fast I almost slipped, grabbed onto the towel rack, heart pounding, and there was nobody there. Just my clothes hanging on the hook, the closed door, the dim light buzzing. I stood there, breathing hard. And I swear to you, my breath was not making that fog pattern on the glass. I tried it. I stepped closer, blew right onto the mirror, and my fog made this oval in front of my mouth that looked different from the patch that was already there. And the other patch did not move or fade with mine. It just stayed. I do not know how long I stood in that bathroom, if it was 30 seconds or 5 minutes. But eventually, I told myself out loud that I was being stupid, that old mirrors do weird things, that there could be some cold pipe behind the wall, whatever, and I forced myself to get dressed. When I opened the bathroom door and stepped back into the room, I was expecting to feel the heater finally catching up, like that wave of warm air you get sometimes. But it did not happen. The room felt like it had not changed at all, maybe worse. I walked over to the heater and put my hand in front of it, and it was blowing warm air, actually warm. The metal on the top was warm when I touched it, but my legs below the knees still felt cold. And when I sat on the bed, the mattress felt like it had been sitting outside. I grabbed one of the extra blankets from the dresser, shook it out, and the fabric felt stiff and cool, like it had been stored in a garage. The TV barely worked, just a couple of channels with static, so I turned it off because the fuzzing noise made me more nervous. And I tried to call dispatch to tell them where I was parked for the night, but the call dropped twice before I even got the location out. The signal bars on my phone jumping up and down. That might not mean much to somebody else, but when you are used to being on the road, you know where you usually get signal and how it behaves. And this was weird, like something was interfering, but I did not have the patience to fight it, so I texted a quick message instead and hoped it went through. I lay down on the bed in my t-shirt and sweatpants and socks, pulled the 2 blankets up, and stared at the ceiling. And there is this thing that happened that I keep coming back to. A little thing, but it feels important. I reached over to turn off the lamp on the nightstand. And for a split second, right before the room went dark, I thought I saw something on the wall across from me, near the bathroom door. Not a figure exactly, more like a shadow that did not match anything in the room. And then the light was off, and I was in that thick motel dark, where you only get a little light from the parking lot through the edges of the curtains. I lay there, listening to the heater hum, and for maybe 10 minutes, nothing happened. I could hear the faint drip of the shower, where the faucet did not close all the way, the occasional car passing on the road, a truck braking somewhere far off, and then I heard it. This soft knocking that at first I thought was someone at the door next to mine. 3 little taps, spaced out, and I waited to hear a voice or a door open, but nothing came, just silence. And then the same 3 taps again, a little louder, and the sound was wrong. It was not coming from the direction of the door. It was coming from the wall behind the headboard, right where my head was. I held my breath and listened. And the knocks came again, same pattern, 3 of them. And with the 3rd one, I felt this tiny vibration in the wall through the bed frame, like someone was knocking from the other side. And I told myself it was pipes or the heater, or someone in the next room doing something stupid. And then I heard what I thought at first was water running, but it was not. It was this low, muffled sound, like someone crying into a pillow on the other side of the wall. It was not loud, but it was steady, this soft, broken sound that did not stop, and it made the hair on my arms stand straight up. I sat up in bed, grabbed my phone, turned the screen on to get some light, and stared at the wall like that was going to show me something. But there was nothing, just old paint and a couple of scuff marks. I checked the time. It was a little after 10, which meant somebody could absolutely be in the next room. But the odd thing was, I had noticed when I walked past that the room next to mine had its curtains open and the lights off, like nobody was staying there. I told myself maybe they checked in late, maybe I missed it, maybe the sound was traveling weird through the building. But the more I listened, the more wrong it felt. Because the crying did not sound like it was in another room. It sounded like it was inside the wall. I do not know how to explain that better. You just know when a sound has space around it and when it is pressed up close to you. And this was the second one. It felt too close. I sat there arguing with myself, part of me saying, go to the office, ask if someone is next door, another part telling me I would look crazy if it was just a TV or something. And while I was stuck in my own head about it, the heater shut off with that little click they all make when they reach temperature, and the room went from cold but bearable to something that felt wrong, like the temperature dropped in a step instead of a slow slide. My breath came out in a visible cloud, and that should not happen in a room with a heater that had just shut off. I swung my legs over and my feet hit the floor, and it was like stepping onto ice. The boards under the carpet felt like they were storing cold, and I walked over to the heater and put my hand in front of it, and there was nothing coming out. Not even residual warmth, and when I touched the metal grill, it was cold. Not just cooled off, but cold. And it had been hot minutes before. I remember saying out loud, "No, that is not right," and hearing my own voice shake. And then the 3 knocks came again, a little sharper this time, and the crying picked up like whoever it was could tell I was standing there. I could hear little gasps between the sobs now, these choked breaths, and I took 1 step closer to the wall, hand out like I was going to touch it. And I felt this resistance on my skin, like the air itself got heavier as I moved, and my fingertips never reached the paint because something in me locked up. I backed away instead, grabbed my jacket off the chair, and in that moment, I just decided I was not staying in that room. I did not care if it made me look scared. I did not care if I had to sleep in the truck. I needed to be anywhere but there. I stuffed my feet into my boots without untying them, grabbed my bag, and headed for the door. And when I opened it, the hallway air hit me, and it felt almost warm, even though outside it had to be colder than the room. And that is when I realized the difference. I stood half in and half out, 1 foot in the room, 1 on the concrete walkway, and it was like there was an invisible line right at the threshold. Inside that line, the air was heavy and cold and wrong. Outside it, the cold was just normal night cold. I stepped all the way out and pulled the door shut, and as the latch clicked, I heard 1 last knock from inside, but it was softer, like somebody tapping from far away. I did not go to the office right away. I went and sat in my truck for a bit, heater running, hands wrapped around a bottle of water. I did not even drink, just staring at the motel doors and that office window with the light on. I told myself to calm down, that I was making too much of it, that I had been on the road too long that day, and I almost convinced myself to just suck it up and go back. But then I thought about that breath on the mirror, and my hand froze halfway to the door handle. I looked at my phone and saw I had 1 bar of service and a voicemail notification. So I played it on speaker, expecting dispatch saying something. But it was just empty air, a faint hiss, and way in the back, if you really listened, it sounded like the same muffled crying. And I hung up fast and deleted it, and my heart started racing again. That is the moment I decided I needed another room, or another place altogether. And I went back into the office. The woman looked up, surprised to see me again, and before she could say anything, I told her the heater in 12 was not working right, and the room was freezing, that I could see my breath, and I did not think I would sleep, and I tried to keep my voice level, like I was just complaining about equipment, but I could hear the edge in it. She looked past me toward the row of doors, like she could see through the wall, and then back at me, and for a second, there was this look on her face, almost like resignation, and she said in this low voice, "I can move you if you want," and I said, "Yes, please, any other room." And she nodded and went to the little wall with the key hooks and took the key down for 5. And when she came back, she hesitated before she put it on the counter. She said, Nobody ever stays in 12 twice. And when she saw my expression, she kind of shook her head and tried to smile and said she was joking, but her eyes did not match the smile. I asked her because I could not help myself. I said, "Is there something wrong with that room? Not just the heater?" And she glanced toward the back door, like she was making sure it was closed. And then she told me quietly that some of the locals called it the cold room, and they had for years, and that the old owner, the one before her, had stopped renting it for a while after something happened. But when she took over, she had to use all the rooms because they did not bring in enough as it was, and that most nights nobody booked 12 anyway. I asked what happened, even though I already knew I did not want to know. And she said there was a man, a truck driver, years back now, before she was there, who checked into 12 during a storm and never checked out. His truck sat in the lot for 2 days before anyone really noticed because there was bad weather and the road was quiet. And when law enforcement finally did a welfare check, the room was empty. No sign of him, no signs of a struggle, nothing. His bag still there, his boots still on the floor, the bed half turned down like he was about to get in. And they never found him, not on the cameras, not on any of the roads. He just was gone. She said it like she was reciting something she had told herself was just a weird missing persons case. But the way her hands twisted in her sweater told a different story. I asked if he could have just walked off, and she said maybe, but there were details in the report that stuck with people. Little things, like how the heater controls were turned all the way up, but the room was cold when they opened the door, and how there were fingerprints on the inside of the wall paint near the headboard, like someone pressed their hands there hard from this side, not the other. But I think she regretted saying that part because she looked at my face and stopped talking. I told her I did not need to hear more. I took the new key and went to 5, and that room was normal, heater working, air just regular. And I tried to tell myself it was done, that 12 was behind me, and I had overreacted. I slept in fits that night, waking up at every sound. But nothing happened in that room. It was just a regular tired sleep. It was the next morning, after I had checked out and gone on with my day, that I realized the cold had followed me. Because when I got into my rig, even after it had been sitting there with the morning sun trying to push through the clouds, the cab felt like 12 had felt. This dense, settled cold, and the steering wheel felt like metal left outside in January. I drove to the delivery, dropped the load, did the paperwork, tried to act normal, but my hands would not stop shaking. And anytime I was alone, if I closed my eyes even for a second, I heard those 3 knocks in my head. Same pattern, same timing, and underneath them, that crying. So faint, I could barely tell if it was memory or something else. That was a while ago now, long enough that a normal story would start to fade around the edges. But this one has not. It has gotten sharper, and the worst part is that it did not stay there. The first time I knew for sure it had come with me was a month later, back home, when my wife asked me why I had turned the thermostat up so high in the house. Said she was sweating and I could not feel what she was talking about. I was sitting there in a hoodie with a blanket over my legs, and my teeth wanted to chatter. I went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. And there was nothing at first, just me and the towel hanging behind me and the little window. And then my breath fogged the glass, and for a second, I saw it again. That second shape off to the side, like someone shorter than me standing close. And I stepped aside fast, and there was nothing there. But when I wiped the mirror, my handprint overlapped another that did not belong to me. Since then, it has been little things. Knocks on the walls at places where there should not be pipes. My phone picking up dead voicemails with that hiss and that distant crying when I am parked for the night. Heaters that shut off when the room is still cold and then turn back on by themselves when I get up to check them. And that sense, you know the one, like someone is standing just outside your line of sight, close enough that if you turned your head fast enough, you would see them, but I never do. I changed my routes for a while, told dispatch I did not want to go back to that part of Oregon, made excuses about weather and fuel and anything I could think of. and they looked at me funny because I am not the kind of guy who complains. But I held firm. When I am on the road at night now, and I see a little motel in the distance, with one of those old signs and a few lonely cars out front, I feel my chest tighten, and I keep driving if I can. I would rather sleep in the cab, cramped and stiff, than trust those rooms. Back home, I started taking the long way around town if I had to pass any place with cold concrete walls. And I never realized how many there were until I started avoiding them. People think this is about the motel, but it is not really. It is about what was in that room and how it did not want to be alone anymore. I know how that sounds, like I am blaming something I cannot see for my own nerves. But I am telling you, man, when you have felt that cold, not the temperature cold, but the other kind, the one that sits behind your ribs and makes your hands feel empty, you know the difference. That is why I am here now, in this car, by this cemetery, because tonight it started again. In a way I could not pretend was my imagination. I was lying in bed next to my wife, the house quiet, the heater humming its normal hum, and I woke up without knowing why, just eyes open, heart beating too fast for someone who had been asleep, and the room felt wrong, not freezing, just wrong, like the air had weight again. I rolled over and saw my own breath in the dark, faint but real, and I felt the mattress dip near my legs, like someone sat down there, careful not to touch my wife, and 3 soft knocks came, not from the wall this time, but from inside the closet door. The sound was small, polite almost, but it went through me, and I knew, just like I knew in 12, that it was for me, that it knew I was awake. I did not say anything. I did not move. I just stared at the closet, and I felt something shift on the bed near my feet, like weight spreading out, and this impulse hit me, hard, to start crying the way I had heard in that room, that same drawn-out, hopeless sound, like it was leaking through. I do not know how long I lay there before I managed to slide out of bed without waking her, grab my keys, and walk out. But I know that when I closed the front door behind me, the air outside felt almost warm compared to inside. And I drove without thinking about where I was going. And I ended up here, at the edge of the cemetery that sits on the far side of town, the one I used to cut through when I was a kid, because it knocked 10 minutes off the walk to school, and I parked facing the gate. It is after 3 now. My battery light is on because I have been sitting with the key turned enough to charge my phone, and every few minutes I have to turn the engine over so it does not die. And every time I do, in that brief moment before the starter catches, when the car is quiet as a tomb, I hear it, that soft knocking, somewhere behind me. Not in the car, not outside it, just behind me. I will not turn around. I cannot. Because I know if I do, I am going to see that patch of fog on the inside of my own rear windshield, right where somebody is breathing who should not be there. And I am scared that if I see that, if I actually watch it happen, it is going to be over. In some way I do not even have words for. So instead, I am talking into this cracked phone, telling you every detail I can remember about that day, and that night, and that room, and that mirror. And maybe you are sitting somewhere warm. Maybe you think this sounds like some truck stop story, something guys make up to scare each other when they are waiting for a load. And I hope that is true for you. I hope you never feel the air shift in a room you thought was safe. I hope you never see breath on a mirror that does not line up with where you are standing. For me, it is too late. The cold is in me now. And I know, deep down, that it is not just the motel, that Cedar Heights was just where I noticed it first, not where it came from. Something else happened to that man who checked in before me, the one who never checked out, and whatever that was, whatever pressed his hands against that wall until the paint cracked and turned the heater up as far as it would go. For nothing. It was not done. It was waiting. I do not walk past motel doors at night anymore, and I do not trust walls that feel too thin, and when I pull into a town I have never seen. and I see a little old sign for rooms. I keep going if I have any miles left in me, because I am not going to be the last one who disappears in a room that stays cold, no matter how high you turn the dial. If you ever find yourself on that road in Oregon and you see the gas station and the row of doors and that flickering sign, and the woman at the desk hands you a key on a plastic tag with the number 12 on it and calls it the cold room, with a half smile, hand it back. I am begging you, say you will sleep in your car, sleep in the dirt, sleep anywhere, because some rooms do not want you to leave. And if you lie down in the wrong one, you might not. And if you do manage to get out, you will never really be out. Not as long as you keep breathing and something else keeps fogging the glass right next to you. My name's Rachel Porter. I'm from Delmore, Pennsylvania, and I work as a night cashier at the gas station on County Road 7 across from the old cemetery. And I am telling you this sitting in my car by that same cemetery gate at 3 in the morning with the engine off because the battery light came on, and I am scared to even turn the key again. And I am talking into this cracked phone like somebody is actually going to listen, but I need to get it out before I lose my nerve. So just stay with me. Please, listen. I swear to God, this is exactly how it happened, or how I remember it, because some parts feel like they are missing now, like somebody cut pieces out of the day and pushed the rest together. But I remember that morning, the morning before it really went wrong, better than I remember what I did last week, which is its own kind of proof to me. So I will start there, with the most boring stuff, because it really was just a normal winter day in Delmore. Nothing special at all. And that is what makes it sit in my chest the way it does. Because I woke up with my alarm at 10 in the morning in that little basement room at my mom's house, the one where you can see the bottoms of people's feet walking past the tiny window. And the first thing I remember is how cold the floor was when I put my feet down, because the space heater in the corner had kicked itself off sometime in the night, and the red light on it was dead, and I could see my breath just a little in that gray light. And I cursed under my breath out of habit, but I'm not going to repeat that part. You get the idea. And I pulled on the same black gas station polo from the back of my chair, the one with the red logo patch over the chest and the little stain from coffee near the hem. And I sniffed it, decided it was fine for one more shift. And then I went upstairs, and my mom had already left for the early shift at the nursing home, so the house was quiet. In that way, it gets in winter when everything feels packed in, and I made the same breakfast I always make before nights. 2 slices of toast with peanut butter and a banana. And I remember I dropped 1 slice peanut butter side down on the counter and just wiped it off with my thumb because we were low on bread and I did not want to waste it. And I stood there eating it and scrolling on my phone with my thumb, stinging from the cold because the kitchen window does not seal right and the draft comes in around the frame, and the local weather app said it would be 23 degrees that night with a chance of light snow and something about a wind advisory. And I remember thinking that the cemetery across from the station would look extra creepy with the plastic flowers moving in the wind. And then I told myself to stop thinking about the cemetery because it always made me uneasy. Even before all of this, even when it was just another place you drive past, and I checked the time, and it was 10:42, and my shift did not start until 6 p.m. So I told myself I would try to sleep a bit more after eating. But I just lay there in the basement with my hoodie pulled over my face, listening to the pipes click and the neighbor's dog bark somewhere outside, and I drifted in and out instead of really sleeping. And that is important because later on I started wondering if maybe I dreamed some of it. But I know I did not. I know I did not, man. I can feel it when I close my eyes anyway. When I finally gave up on sleeping, it was around 3 in the afternoon, and I checked my phone and had a text from my manager, Hank, reminding me that the delivery truck might come late, near midnight, and to make sure the back door was clear, and another from my cousin asking if I could cover a Saturday for her next month, and nothing else, just a normal phone, normal day. and I pulled on my jeans and boots. The cheap work boots with the cracking fake leather and the lines where they rub my heels. And I knotted my hair back in a low ponytail. No makeup, just chapstick because the air has been so dry. And I grabbed my keys, my lanyard with the clock and fob, and my old blue parka, the one that used to be my dad's, and I went out to the driveway and the car turned over a little slow, but it still started. And I remember watching the cemetery as I drove past the first time that day on my way into town, because there is no way to get to the station from my mom's place without passing it. It sits on that little hill over the road with the chain link fence and the old stone gate posts that say Delmore Memorial in iron letters, and the headstones start almost right at the fence, like they ran out of room, and just kept going until they touched it. And in winter, the grass goes that flat brown color, and the plastic flowers look brighter against it, and you can see the taller stones from the road. And there is this one tall angel near the middle I have always hated, because from the right angle, it looks like it is watching the cars. And that afternoon, it was just there, like normal. No snow yet, just dirty old frost along the edges. And the flag in the middle, the one by the little veterans section, was hanging limp on the pole. No wind at all, and the sky was that pale gray. And I remember noticing the flag, because later it did not move even when the wind was loud, and that stuck out to me. But I am getting ahead. Sorry. I do that when I get nervous. I jump around, I know. So I go into town. I stop at the grocery discount place because we were out of trash bags. And I bought a pack for home and a chocolate milk and a pre-made ham sandwich for my dinner at work. And the lady at the register asked if I was on nights again. And I said, yeah, because everybody knows everybody in Delmore. And she said, make sure you stay inside if that siren starts up, honey. And she said it so casual, like she was telling me to wear a hat if it snowed. And I laughed and said, I have heard about the siren my whole life, and I have never actually heard it. And she just kind of pressed her lips together and said, it is not funny when it does blow. And for a second, her eyes did this thing where she looked past me, like she was seeing something that was not there. And I felt that little pinch in my stomach. But then she rang up the next customer and it was gone. And I got back in my car and headed toward the station. And by the time I pulled into the lot, it was 5:37, because I remember checking the clock and thinking I had a few minutes to sit in the car and finish the chocolate milk before clocking in. And from the lot, you can see straight across the road to the cemetery gate, the same one I am parked by right now, and it looked the same as always then. But the light was going, that blue kind of light you get right before it turns fully dark in winter, and the cars going by were already flipping on their headlights, and I could see my own reflection faint in the convenience store windows, the fluorescent lights inside, making the front of the store look bright against the dim parking lot. And I sat there, finishing my drink and scrolling my phone, and not thinking about anything heavier than a meme my cousin sent. And that is the last time I remember that place feeling normal, like just another job, just another night. I clocked in at 5:52, which I only know because later I checked the time cards over and over to convince myself I was actually there the whole time I thought I was. And when I went behind the counter, Hank was there finishing up his shift, doing that thing where he pretends to wipe down the lotto machine while watching the security monitors. And he nodded at me and said, "You ready for the crazies, Rachel?" And I laughed and said, "It is Tuesday. Nothing crazy ever happens on Tuesday." And he said, "Maybe if that siren kicks up." And when he said it, I felt that same little pinch, like when the grocery lady said it. Because it is one thing when your grandma tells stories about a siren that means trouble, and another when two different people say it like it is just a part of winter, same as ice on the roads or salt stains on your boots. And I asked him, "Does that thing even still work?" And he shrugged and said, "You will know when you hear it." And maybe he saw something in my face because he leaned in a bit and said, "Listen, if you hear it, you only really got to remember one thing. If it blows once, you stay calm. You keep doing what you were doing. If it blows twice in a row, you do not open that door for anybody. and you do not look out that glass longer than it takes to lock it." And I kind of smirked and asked, "What about 3 times?" And he straightened up, and for the first time since I had known him, he did not joke. He just looked at me and said, "It does not blow 3 times. And then he grabbed his coat and jingled his keys and said, "Call me if the soda fountain acts up again." And by the time the automatic doors slid open and shut behind him, my skin was prickling under my work shirt in a way that had nothing to do with the draft by the doors. And I told myself he was just messing with me because I was still kind of the new girl. I had only been on nights 4 months, and people love to pass on local stories when someone is stuck alone in a glass box for 8 hours. And I pushed it away and started my routine, counted the drawer, logged the starting amount, checked the hot case for old corn dogs, wiped down the counter, straightened the cigarette packs, all the stupid little things that fill the time, so you do not think about how quiet it gets. And even when it was still early evening, the place was already emptier than usual, like people had decided to get home early. And the customers I did get were all the same type: tired faces, heavy coats, paying for gas and a coffee and nothing else. And a couple of them muttered things like, "Hope it stays quiet tonight," under their breath. And one guy, a regular named Mitch who drives a plow truck, looked through the window out toward the cemetery before he left and said, "You working the whole night?" And I said, "Yeah." And he nodded slowly and said, "Keep the doors locked after 10, just to be safe." And I said, "From what?" And he shook his head and said, "Just to be safe," and walked out. And I felt like a kid again, hearing older people talk about grown-up stuff in half sentences, like they assume you already know, except this time, I was the one standing there alone under the buzzing lights. By 9 o'clock, the sky was fully dark and the wind had picked up, and you could hear it catch on the corners of the building and whistle around the glass doors. And every time the doors opened for a customer, it was like the air from outside grabbed hold of the warm aisle smell of coffee and chips and dragged it toward the road. And I started watching the cemetery more, because there is a direct line of sight from the counter between the lottery stand and the coffee station, where you can see the entrance gate and the first few rows of headstones. And every time a pair of headlights swept past on the road, the stones would jump into view for a second like teeth, then disappear again in the dark. And I kept telling myself to stop staring. So I would look down at my phone, and then my eyes would drift back up without me even noticing. And at some point, I realized the flag at the little veterans section was not moving at all, even though the wind was loud enough that the metal poles for the parking signs were rattling. And it made my stomach do a flip, because the flag should have been moving more than anything, hanging way up like that. But it just stood there, straight down, no flutter, like the air around it was thick and heavy. And I remember thinking that was the first thing that was really wrong, the first thing that did not line up with normal. But I did not say it out loud. I just took my phone and opened a game, something dumb, and tried to let my brain go empty. Around 10, the last little rush of people came through, the ones grabbing milk or cigarettes or gas before shutting themselves in for the night. And you could feel them moving faster than usual, nobody lingering to talk. And this older lady, Mrs. Green, she has come in every Sunday for years and sometimes on weekdays. She shuffled up to the counter with a loaf of bread and a 6-pack of water, and she set them down and looked me in the eye and said, "Do you have a radio back there?" And I pointed to the old one we keep by the cigarettes, tuned to the local station, sometimes playing oldies, and she said, "If that siren goes, you turn that thing up loud. You hear me? You do not want to hear it too clear." And I half laughed and asked her, "What is it even for? Like, is it tornadoes or something?" And she pressed her lips together until they went white and said, "It is not weather." And then she slid her card and left without saying goodnight. And I stood there, holding the receipt out, long after the door closed behind her, because the way she said "not weather" made my mouth go dry. By 11, the store was empty, and it had started to snow a little. Not much, just light dry flakes that the wind shoved around. So sometimes you could see them in the parking lot lights, and sometimes it looked clear, and cars got rarer and rarer, until there was a 10-minute stretch where I saw no headlights at all. And that is unusual even for Delmore, because there is always at least someone cutting through from the highway. And I remember checking my phone for the time, 11:13, and then checking again because it felt too early for it to be that quiet. And I walked around the counter like I always do when I get restless, pretended to straighten the chips, restacked the coffee cups, that kind of thing. All the while, feeling the front glass at my back like a big open eye. And I kept telling myself not to turn and stare out, because there is nothing to see but my own reflection. And the cemetery, and the more you look, the more your brain fills in shapes. So I focused on the shelves instead, listening to the hum of the cooler fans in the back and the occasional clunk from the ice machine. The first time I heard the siren, I almost did not realize what it was, because it started as a low rise under everything else, under the fans and the hum of the lights and the wind. A kind of low moan stretched out, and I thought at first it might be a truck's brakes on the highway. Except there were no trucks, and the sound kept climbing, slow and steady, until it filled the store. Not loud exactly, but inside everything. Like it found the gaps around the door and came in that way. And it had this old quality, like it was coming from a piece of metal that had not been used in a long time, rough around the edges. And the hair on my arms stood up under my sleeves, and I froze in the coffee aisle, holding a stack of stir sticks, and I counted without meaning to. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, all the way up until I lost count somewhere around 15. And the sound stayed up at that high pitch for a few more seconds, then cut off clean, no fade, just gone. And the quiet after felt louder than the siren itself. And I realized my heart was pounding, and I knew that had to be it, the siren everybody talked about. And I waited, listening for car doors or voices or anything coming in. But nothing happened for a full minute, and then the phone on the counter rang, and I nearly dropped the stir sticks. It was Hank calling from his house. He did not say hello, just went straight to "You heard that, right?" And I said, "Yeah, what is it for?" And he said, "Just stay inside, doors locked." That was one. And I said, "One what?" And he said, "1 blast. That is just the warning. Sometimes they test it, but not usually this late, so just stay put. And if you hear it again, you lock the doors, understand?" And I asked him who they even is, like who runs the siren, and he was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Nobody really agrees on that, but the town pays the power bill on it, so I guess that is close enough." And he cleared his throat and said, "I am heading over there. Make sure everything is all right." And I said, "You do not have to." And he said, "I do." And then he hung up without saying goodbye, which he never does. And that made the back of my neck go tight. After that first blast, a couple of cars went past the station fast, like they were late for something, and one of them pulled into the lot. A silver pickup I recognized as belonging to a guy named Darren who works at the lumber yard. And he came in with his jacket half unzipped and snow in his hair, even though it was barely snowing. And he slapped a 20 on the counter and said, "Pump 3. And then he hesitated, looked toward the window and said, "Did you hear that?" And I said, "The siren, yeah, what is it?" And he shook his head and said, "My granddad used to come drag us kids inside when that thing went off, said nothing good happens in Delmore when it screams after dark." And he started to say more, then stopped, like he remembered something he did not want to repeat. And he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "If it blows twice tonight, you get away from the glass, you hear me?" And his hand shook a little when he picked up his change, and he left without his receipt. And as he crossed the lot, I saw him glance up at the cemetery, like he did not want to, but had to. The time between the first and second blasts stretched out. I kept thinking it must have been at least an hour, but when I checked the clock later, it was only about 20 minutes. Nothing big happened in that time, just small things that did not feel small in the moment, like the way the radio station dropped into static right after the siren, and then came back with a different song without the DJ saying anything. or the way the motion sensor for the bathroom light at the back kept clicking on even though nobody had gone in there, or the way my own reflection in the front glass started to look wrong to me, like my shoulders did not line up right with my head. Tiny things that made me keep touching my face and looking at my hands just to feel anchored. And I tried so hard to tell myself I was spooking myself, that this was what happens when you are tired on night shift and everybody fills your head with stories. But my body was not listening. My body was acting like there was something in the room with me, even when I could see every corner and knew I was alone. The second blast came when I was behind the counter, lining up the scratch-off tickets, and this time there was no slow climb. It just hit, right away, full volume, so strong the plastic on the candy racks rattled and I felt it in my fillings. And I dropped the stack of tickets and they scattered across the floor. But I did not bend to pick them up, because the sound pinned me in place, and I knew without anybody telling me that this was the second one. The one they meant, the one they warned me about. And I remembered Hank and the grocery lady, and Mrs. Green and Darren, all of them saying variations of the same thing. Do not look, lock the doors, stay inside. And my hands moved before my brain did, reaching for the button that locks the front doors and pressing it, watching the little green light above the frame turn red. And I grabbed the keys from under the counter and flipped the manual bolt too, even though I knew the automatic lock was enough and the siren kept going and going. And my hands shook so hard the keys slipped once, and I had to force myself not to glance straight out at the cemetery. So I looked low, at the parking lot instead, at the empty spaces and the yellow lines, and in the reflection of the floor tiles, I could see a slice of movement out by the gate, something shifting between the posts, but I told myself it was just the snow and the headlights of a distant car, even though there were no headlights, and the sound stayed high and then cut off again, sharp, leaving my ears ringing. And I realized I was breathing fast. Little short breaths like I had run up a hill, and I had to hold the counter edge just to feel steady. Silence after a siren is not real silence. It is like everything else pulls back a layer. The hum of the lights, the wind, my own heartbeat, all of it gets louder in the empty space. The siren leaves, and I could hear my own swallowing, the little tick of the security camera as it moved, the faint rattle of plastic flowers across the road. And I know that sounds like something out of a story, but I swear that is what it sounded like. A dry rattle that did not match the wind, like somebody shaking cheap flowers in their fist. And I focused on my tasks. I forced myself to bend down and pick up the dropped tickets one by one, to count them, to put them back in order. And I talked to myself under my breath, saying numbers out loud, keeping up a little stream of nonsense, just so I did not have to listen. And I told myself that was it, that maybe the siren was done, that whatever old system they were using had glitched and gone off twice. And now it would stay quiet, and I could go back to being bored and annoyed instead of waiting for something I could not see. Then it blew a third time. You know how sometimes when something important happens, it takes your brain a second to catch up, like it is lagging behind your senses, and you stand there doing nothing because you do not know which part of you to listen to first. That is what the third blast did to me, because there was no space between the second and the third. Not really. I sat back down on the little stool behind the counter. I unwrapped the ham sandwich I had bought earlier. I took one bite, and then the siren hit again, louder than before. So loud I felt it in the soles of my feet through the rubber mat. And for a second, I just stared at my half-unwrapped sandwich, because my brain was telling me that was impossible, that everyone had said it only blew twice, that 3 was not a thing. There was no third option. And that meant either all of them had been lying for years, or whatever rules they thought they knew had just broken, and neither of those felt safe to believe. And the sandwich slipped out of my hand and hit the floor mayonnaise side down, and I did not move to pick it up. I did not even smell it. The only thing in my head was that sound, and the numbers 1, 2, 3, like a kid counting. And the siren went on and on, longer than the other two, this thick, steady wail that felt closer somehow. Not just from the direction of the town hall where the old tower sits, but from everywhere at once, like it was right above the store and under the floor and behind my eyes. The doors were already locked, but when the third blast started, something in the store changed. The lights did not go out, but they dimmed for a second and then came back a little too bright. Colors off just enough that the reds on the chip bags looked too dark and the whites of the coolers looked almost blue, and the radio cut out mid-song and did not come back, not even static, just a soft hiss that blended into the siren. And on the security monitor, I saw the image flicker, all 4 little boxes jumping and then settling. And in the top left, the one pointed at the parking lot and the road, I saw movement, clear as anything, a figure walking along the sidewalk in front of the station, heading toward the doors, slow and steady, not hunched against the wind like you would expect on a night that cold, just moving like the temperature meant nothing. And I leaned closer to the screen, squinting, because at first all I could see was the outline, the dark coat, the hair pulled back, the hands at the sides, and then when they stepped into the full light of the front awning, my stomach dropped because I recognized the jacket, that old blue parka with the frayed cuffs and the oil stain near the bottom, and I recognized the way the person's hair was tied, low at the neck, a little crooked, and the way their shoulders sloped, and for a second I thought, that is a recording of me coming in for my shift. That is not live, the camera is glitching. But the timestamp on the feed said 11:39 p.m., and that was now, not then. And my own hands were on the counter in front of me, and my own feet were behind the register, and still the person in the monitor kept walking, right up to the locked doors, and stopped. I do not know how long I stood there with my eyes glued to that screen, barely breathing. The siren was still going, stretching on, but it felt like it had receded, like it was behind a wall somewhere, because all I could focus on was that figure in the feed, standing on the other side of the glass, facing the store, not moving, just there. And even though the camera is mounted high in the corner of the ceiling, so you are looking down at an angle, I could see the tilt of their head, the way they were looking straight at the door, and I knew without seeing their face that if I turned around and looked, I would see my own features looking back at me from the other side. I told myself not to turn. I told myself, listen, you know what everybody said. You know what your own body is telling you. Do not look. Do not give it that. Do not put an image in your head. You will not be able to scrub out enough. Just stay where you are. Wait for Hank. Wait for the siren to stop. But there is something in us that hates not knowing more than it hates being afraid. And even while I was telling myself not to, my feet were already turning, the rubber soles squeaking a little on the mat, my hands leaving the edge of the counter to hang useless at my sides, and I turned, slow, like in a dream where you move through water, until I was facing the front of the store. They were right there, inches away, separated from me by that thin layer of glass and a few inches of cold air. I did not see some monster with teeth or empty eye sockets or anything like that. I saw myself. Same blue parka zipped up to the chin, same black work polo peeking out at the top, same jeans right down to the little frayed thread on the left pocket, same work boots, the scuffed toes, the same, and the face, my face, pressed close enough to the glass that the nose flattened a little, and the skin of the forehead looked shiny from the reflection of the fluorescent lights, and I could see every line, every pore, the chapped lips, the red spot on the chin I had seen in the bathroom mirror before I left home, except it was not a mirror. It could not be a mirror, because my hands were at my sides, and hers were too. And when I swallowed, I watched my throat move under my skin and did not see hers do the same. And when I blinked, she did not. And that more than anything made my knees go weak. The siren kept screaming, but it sounded far away now, like it was happening in another town. The glass fogged around where her mouth and nose were. Not evenly, but in little bursts, like breaths that did not line up with mine. Too slow, too deep, and her eyes, my eyes, were wrong. Not in some big obvious way. They were still brown, still the same shape, but they were too wide and too calm at the same time. Like somebody had opened them as far as they would go, and then smoothed all the emotion out, and the corners did not crease even a little. And the longer I stared at them, the more I felt like I was leaning over the edge of something high. I could have screamed. I could have grabbed the phone and dialed 911, or called Hank back, or turned and run out the back door. But I did none of those things. I just stood there, frozen, and after what felt like a long time, but was probably only a few seconds, the thing outside did something that still wakes me up at night. It smiled, not big, not theatrical, just a slow curl of the mouth that started too far back toward the ears. As if it had to show me it knew how a smile was supposed to look, but had only learned from watching. And the skin at the cheeks did not fold the way it should. It just stretched, and her teeth looked normal. That was the worst part. They were my teeth, not sharp or broken, just regular. And seeing them made it feel all the more wrong, because there was nothing I could point at and say, that is not human. And yet every part of me knew I should not be seeing my own face like that from that side of the glass. Then it lifted its right hand, slowly, and pressed it flat against the door. I watched the skin of the palm flatten, the fingers spread, the way the small scar on the side of the thumb, the one I got from opening a can years ago, matched mine perfectly. On my side of the counter, my own hands started to lift on their own, some stupid instinct to match it, to prove it was just a reflection. And I had to lock my fists onto the edge of the counter to stop myself from reaching out. And I whispered, "Stop," under my breath, not sure who I was talking to. And the thing outside tilted its head like it heard me. Except it should not have. The glass and the siren and the distance should have made my voice nothing. But its ears, my ears, twitched like a dog hearing a whistle. It knocked then. That is the part that nobody believes when I try to say it out loud. They think I am exaggerating because knocks are in every story. But they were so normal, so polite, that it makes me want to shake people until they understand. 3 crisp taps on the glass, not hard enough to shake it, just enough to be heard, perfectly spaced, and the sound cut right through the siren, sharp and close. And I flinched like someone had slapped me, and my heart finally jerked me out of my trance, and I dropped to my knees behind the counter, out of sight, my breath coming in big, stupid gulps. And I crawled backward until my shoulders hit the cigarette shelf and some of the packs rustled down onto me. The siren kept going. The knocking did not repeat. For a while, the only sound in the store was the combined hum of everything and my own breathing. I stayed down, hugging my knees, feeling the dust from under the counter sticking to my hands, and I whispered to myself, counting 1 to 60, then starting again. Like if I reached some secret number, everything would snap back to normal. And I told myself not to look, not to get up and check, because as long as I did not see it again, maybe it was gone. And at some point, I realized the siren had stopped, mid-wail, no fade, just like before. Only this time, the quiet felt even worse, wider somehow. And I could hear something else under it, a faint static hiss coming from the speakers in the ceiling, like the store itself was holding its breath. The phone on the counter rang again. The sound was so sudden and normal that I squeaked, actually squeaked like a scared kid. And I forced myself to inch forward on my knees until I could reach up and grab the receiver without putting my head above the counter edge. It was Hank again, his voice tight, asking, "You all right? You still inside?" And I said, "Yeah, something is at the door." And he cut me off, saying, "Do not open it, no matter what you see. Do not open that door until I get there. I am on my way." And I said, "It looks like me." And he was quiet for a second, too long, and then he said, "I am 5 minutes out. Lock the back door too. And if the phone rings again, and you do not recognize the number, do not answer. And before I could ask him how I was supposed to know which numbers to trust, he hung up. I had to stand up to get to the back door. There was no way around that. I thought about just staying put, staying behind the counter, but the idea of that thing finding another way in, of coming around the side and realizing the back was open, made my skin crawl worse than the idea of crossing the store once. So I forced myself to my feet, keeping my eyes down, focused on the floor tiles, the scattered scratch-off tickets, the smear of mayonnaise from my dropped sandwich, the little damp footprints I had left when I came back in from checking the trash earlier. And I moved past the end of the aisle, past the front doors, wanting so badly to glance sideways and see if the glass was empty. But I stared straight ahead at the hallway that led to the bathrooms and the tiny office and the back door. And I walked faster than I probably should have, almost running the last few steps, practically slamming into the metal bar of the door. And when I tested it, it was already locked. Thank God. The bolt slid in, but I threw the extra deadbolt anyway and checked it twice, hand shaking. On my way back, I could not help it. I tried to stay focused on the ground, but as I stepped back into the main store area, my eyes flicked up for just a second, just enough to catch the front glass in the corner of my vision, and my stomach lurched because the space in front of the doors was empty. No one standing there, no blue parka, no fog on the glass. Just the reflection of the aisles and the parking lot lights casting 3 bright circles onto bare asphalt. And for a heartbeat, I felt so relieved I thought I might cry, but then another part of my brain, the part that keeps you from stepping into traffic, whispered, "Where did it go?" I did not see anybody out there. No cars in the lot, no headlights coming down the road, no shape leaning on the cement trash can by the doors, nothing. And the cemetery across the road was a black shape against the slightly less black sky. No visible stones now, just the outline of the hill and the gateposts. And I could not see the flag at all, which meant the wind had either torn it off or the darkness had thickened enough to swallow it. And both options made my hands sweat. I backed behind the counter again and checked the camera feeds, all 4 of them. Inside the store, nothing. The aisles, nothing. The cooler section, nothing. The back hallway, nothing. And the parking lot view showed only those 3 islands of light and a smear of snow near pump 2. No figure, no tracks leading away from the door. The only footprints in the thin dusting of snow were the ones from earlier customers, and my own from when I took the trash out at 9. I told myself that was good. That meant I had imagined the whole thing, or misread my reflection, or maybe the security camera had glitched a recording from earlier onto the live feed, and my brain had filled in the rest, and I tried to hold on to that, to press it down over the part of me that was still shaking. I picked up the fallen cigarette packs, restacked them. I wiped down the counter, even though it was already clean. I bent and picked up the sandwich, threw it away, tied off the trash even though the bag was not full. All the while, the radio stayed dead, the speakers humming that soft, nothing noise, and the clock crept forward, digits changing with a tiny click that sounded way too loud in the quiet. Hank did not arrive in 5 minutes. That is another thing I checked later, on the security timestamps. From the 3rd siren to when his truck pulled into the lot, almost 30 minutes passed, even though he swears he left his house right after hanging up and lives only 7 minutes away. He says the roads looked clear when he got in the truck, and then suddenly the snow was so thick he had to drive 20 miles an hour. But when I looked outside during that stretch, I did not see a blizzard, just the same dry flakes, drifting. Something about that time does not line up, and I do not know which of us lost it. A few minutes before his truck finally showed up, the store phone rang again. This time, the caller ID just said, "Unknown," in all caps, and my first instinct was to ignore it, to let it ring until it gave up, but the sound chewed at my nerves, and after the 4th ring, I snapped and picked it up just to make it stop, telling myself I could hang up right away if it was anything weird. I lifted the receiver and said the standard script. "Thank you for calling County Road Gas. This is Rachel." And at first there was nothing. Just that same soft static I could hear from the ceiling. Like the line was open, but nobody was there. And I was about to hang up when I heard breathing. Slow, steady, too steady, like someone remembering how to do it. I said, "Hello," thinking maybe it was Hank from a different number, or some customer stuck outside asking if we were open. And the breathing paused, then started again. And then I heard my own voice. I did not hear a copy of my words, not an echo. It said something I had not said out loud yet, something I had only thought. The phrase, "You should have opened the door," came through the line in my own tone, the way I sound when I talk into my voicemail, calm and a little bored. Except I was not calm. I was on the edge of tears and hearing my own sound coming back at me, saying the opposite of what I wanted, made something inside me twist. I hung up. I did not answer back, did not say anything clever or brave. I just slammed the receiver down and then unplugged the phone from the wall because I could not stand the idea of it ringing again. The second the plug came out, the static in the ceiling speakers cut off too, like they had been connected, and the sudden clean silence made my ears ring. That is when Hank's headlights finally swept across the lot. I have never been so relieved to see a beat-up red pickup in my life. He pulled up right in front of the doors, hopped out, and jogged up with his coat half open, and I could see him glancing over at the cemetery as he did. A quick flick of the eyes he probably did not even know he was doing. And he tried the handle, then remembered I had locked it. And he gave me this little wave through the glass. I almost ran to unlock it, but my hand hovered over the button for a second, because a tiny part of me thought, what if it is not him? What if it is just another copy? And then he did something the thing outside had not done, something small. He stomped his feet and rubbed his hands together for warmth and fogged the glass with his breath in quick little bursts. And something about the way his face crinkled at the eyes when he looked in looked so human it made my chest ache. And I pushed the button, watched the light go green, and opened the door. Cold wind rushed in, bringing the smell of snow and exhaust, and something else, something dry and old from across the road. But having another living person there pushed it back a bit. Hank stepped in, shut the door behind him, flipped the manual lock without being told, and looked me over, head to toe, like he was checking for cracks. "You okay?" he asked, and I said, "I think so." But my voice did not sound right to my own ears. It sounded thin, and I realized my hands were still shaking. He walked the store with me, checking the back door and the aisles and the bathroom. All the normal things you check when you think there might have been someone around. And there was nobody, no signs of forced entry, nothing broken, nothing moved that should not be. And for a second, I thought about not telling him what I had seen. Because how do you say, "I saw myself standing at the door," without sounding like you need to be sent home? But he must have seen something in my face, because he stopped by the coffee machine, leaned on the counter and said, "Tell me exactly what happened from the first siren." And he listened without interrupting while I spilled it. The sound, the rules people told me. The first and second blasts, the knocks, the phone call, all of it. And when I got to the part about the figure at the glass, the one that looked like me, his jaw clenched, just a little, and he did not say, "You imagined it," or "You have been awake too long," which is what I expected. He just said, "That is new." And that two-word sentence scared me more than if he had told me I was crazy. We checked the camera footage together in the office, rewinding to the time of the third siren, letting it play. The grainy black and white version of the parking lot came up, the usual empty asphalt. And then there I was, from earlier in the evening, walking out to dump the trash, the timestamp reading 9:02 p.m., even though we had jumped ahead to after 11. Then the image jumped, a flicker, and the timestamp rolled forward to 11:39. And for maybe 2 seconds, 3 at the most, the figure I had seen was there, standing at the door, looking in. everything about it matching what I remembered, and then the feed cut to static, just a gray fuzz, before coming back with an empty frame. We rewound it 3 times. It was always the same. There is no way to prove the person in the frame was me or not me, because the angle is bad and the image is fuzzy. But I knew, and judging by the way Hank's face went pale, he knew something was off too. He burned that little section of footage to a USB drive and said he wanted to keep it, just in case. And then he told me he would stay with me until the end of my shift, so I would not be alone. He made it sound casual, like he could use the extra hours. But he did not leave the store again that night, not even to smoke. And every time a car went by, or the wind hit the windows just right, he would glance at the doors, quick and sharp. Nothing else big happened before dawn. No more siren, no more figures at the glass. A couple of early morning customers came in for coffee, acting like it was any other day. And when the sky started to lighten in that faint way, it does around 7, my legs felt like they were made of someone else's muscles, rubbery and barely holding me up. When the day shift girl, Mariah, came in at 8, we did not tell her the full story. Hank just said there had been some weirdness with the siren and that he would get someone in to look at the cameras. And I clocked out and went straight to my car without looking across the road. I thought maybe that would be it. A story I would tell years later, maybe after a drink or two, about the night the siren blew 3 times, and I saw something that looked like me in the glass. I thought it would fade. It did not. That night, I did not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that flattened nose on the glass. Those 2 wide eyes. I kept hearing my own voice on the phone, saying things I did not say. I kept thinking about the missing 20 minutes on the timestamps, about the flag that would not move in the wind, about the way the siren felt closer the 3rd time. Around 3 in the morning, I realized I had been sitting in the dark in my room for hours, staring at my own reflection in the little closet mirror, watching for any sign that something was off. My mom knocked once to ask if I was okay, and I said I was just tired from work, and she left it at that, which was almost worse. I tried to go back to the station a few nights later. I told myself if I skipped work over this, it would win, whatever it was, and I needed the money, needed the hours. But as soon as I got into the car and started down County Road 7, the sight of the cemetery gate in my headlights made my chest tighten so bad I had to pull over, right about where I am parked now. I sat there with the engine idling, staring through the windshield at those stone posts and the dark beyond. And in my mind, I kept seeing that blue parka just inside the gate, my own back turned toward me, waiting. And I could not make my hands shift the car into drive again. I texted Hank and told him I was sick. He said not to worry about it, that he would cover. I have not done a night shift since. I took mornings for a while, then I stopped altogether, picked up cleaning work at the school instead, early afternoons when the sun is still up. I changed the way I drive so I do not have to pass any burial grounds. That is harder than you think in a town like this. There are more little plots than you notice when you are not looking for them. Family names on little hills. Churches with stones wrapped close around the buildings. Places for the dead tucked into corners of the map. I know where all of them are now. I have a mental grid of routes that go around them, longer and more awkward, but I take them anyway. I cannot help it. Sirens bother me in a way they never did before. Not just the old one by the town hall, though when it blows now during tests in the daytime, I feel my vision go tight. But also ambulance sirens on the highway, tornado tests on the news from other places, even certain alarm sounds on my phone. Anything that starts low and climbs makes my stomach clench. I shut off the weather alerts and I keep the radio low or off when I drive past anything that could be a cemetery, even if it is just a strip of land with 3 stones on it. I asked around a little, carefully, about that 3rd blast. Most people just shrugged or acted like they did not know what I was talking about. A couple of the older ones, their mouths tightened the way Mrs. Green's did, and they said, sometimes it acts up, and would not say more. One guy at the bar, when I pushed harder after a drink I should not have had, said, "You are too young to remember the winter. They shut it off for a whole year." And when I asked why, he looked at me like he wished he had not said anything, and muttered something about a pastor seeing his own wife walking the rows when she was out of town. And then he changed the subject, and I did not press, because I did not want to hear another story that sounded too close to mine. I still drive by the station sometimes in the late afternoon, when the sky is not fully dark, so I can pretend it is safe to look. They put new decals on the windows with some promotion for coffee, big white letters that block part of the view, and they installed a different camera system, a newer one. From the road, you can barely see the cemetery behind it during the day when the sun is right, just a few stones peeking over the fence. The flag in the middle is back up, or maybe it was never down, I do not know, but I watch it every time, and so far it has always moved when the wind does, which should make me feel better. It does not. Tonight, I thought I was ready to come sit here, by the gate, and talk this into my phone like I am doing now. Get it out in one long shot, make some kind of sense of it. I parked across from the stone posts at 2:46 a.m., turned off the headlights, left the engine running for the heat, and stared through the windshield at the metal fence, the dark trees beyond, the faint outlines of the taller stones. The snow on the ground is thin, patchy. Enough to catch the light from the road, but not enough to really cover anything. And every now and then, a car goes by, splashing that temporary brightness over the gate, and each time my heart jumps, expecting to see a blue parka standing just inside. So far, I have not. Maybe I will play this back tomorrow and feel stupid for how scared I sound. Maybe. What I cannot say out loud to anyone else is the part that wakes me up most. It is small, smaller than the knocks, smaller than the phone call. It is this. After that night, I checked my clothes, the blue parka, the work polo, the jeans and boots. I expected them to look the same because they are just clothes. Instead, I found a smear on the left cuff of the parka I do not remember getting, a grayish line like dust from stone. And no matter how many times I wash it, that line does not fade. Maybe I brushed it against the door frame. Maybe it is nothing. But when I hold my arm out just right, the mark lines up almost exactly where the thing's sleeve pressed against the glass. I do not know what the siren is, or who runs it, or why it blows when it does. I do not know what that thing outside the gas station wanted, or what would have happened if I had opened the door, or if I had lifted my hand to match its on the glass. I only know that since that night, I cannot look at my own reflection for too long without feeling like it is waiting for me to slip, to forget which side of the glass I am on. I avoid every cemetery I can, and when I cannot, I turn up the radio and focus straight ahead, not letting my eyes wander to the stones. Tonight, sitting here, the battery light came on, and I turned the engine off because I'm scared of getting stranded. But now the silence feels too big, and I keep glancing at the mirror and at the gate, and my breath is fogging the inside of the windshield in uneven patches. And somewhere in the distance, too faint to be real, I think I can hear a low rise, a sound starting to climb, and I am telling myself it is just the wind in the highway signs, nothing more. Because if it is anything else, I do not know what I will do, and I am so tired, and I have not really slept since that night. And I do not walk past cemeteries anymore. I go the long way. I take the back roads. I change course when I see rows of stones ahead. Because once you have watched your own face press against the glass and smile from the wrong side, you do not take chances with the places where the dead are supposed to stay put. You just do not, man. You just do not.